Chapter 25-36. Diverting the trouble. When the Black Smoke King was completely annihilated by the slaughtering Dao finger, the countless Black Smoke tribe members in the distance seemed to have sensed something. Zhuan looked at the endless Black Smoke tribe members in the distance. They were like black clouds pressing down on the border, and he was scared witless. He knew that the Black Smoke King must have notified the entire Black Smoke tribe in the Six Desires heavenly domain. With so many Black Smoke tribe members, it was enough to annihilate Zhuan and Bloodscale into nothingness. Zhuan had already set up a concealment formation behind them. Furthermore, the Black Smoke tribe members were very far away. Zhuan believed that the Black Smoke tribe members had not seen him and Bloodscale kill the Black Smoke King. It seemed that the Black Smoke King had sent a message to the Black Smoke tribe members before he died. Although he did not know the content of the message, Zhuan could guess that his and Bloodscale's identities had definitely been exposed. "Zhuan, what should we do?" Bloodscale's face was still pale. After using his trump card just now, his injuries were extremely severe. Now, he could barely do some basic movements. It was impossible for him to fight. Zhuan had used the slaughtering Dao finger, which had consumed a lot of his energy. Not to mention that Zhuan and Bloodscale were currently not in their best condition. Even if they were, they would not be a match for the endless Black Smoke tribe members. "We need to find a scapegoat." Zhuan swept in front of the black hole barrier and immediately formed a seal with both hands. At the same time, he took out 81 beast bone array discs and began to deduce the way the barrier worked. The way the barrier worked was extremely clever. Even though Zhuan had already become a level 9 Divine Array Master, Zhuan knew that he was still far from being able to break the barrier. However, what he was doing now was not to break the barrier. Instead, he was changing the position of the barrier, causing the original position of the barrier to change slightly. Of course, while changing the location of the barrier, Zhuan was also deciphering the location of the barrier. He understood clearly that the experts of the Devouring Clan were on the other side of the barrier. What he needed to do now was to lure the experts of the Devouring Clan to the 8 heavens. Then he would change the location of the barrier. Hurry up. The Black Smoke tribe is not far from us." Bloodscale could vaguely guess what Zhuan was going to do. Zhuan's eyes were solemn. His hands formed hand seals at an extremely fast speed, like a howling gale. His eyes grew brighter and brighter. "All right, I'll set up a temporary teleportation array and teleport back to Pill Furnace City. I've changed the location of this barrier. I'm afraid the experts of the Great Desolate Heaven territory can't find it in a short time. And that expert of the Devouring Clan will follow the mark I've left to teleport to this place." After saying that, Zhuan changed his hand seals. 81 beast bone array discs quickly arranged themselves into an exquisite teleportation array. When he left Pill Furnace City, he had secretly left a teleportation array on the 10th floor of the Pill Tower. The Six Desires heavenly realm was full of dangers. Zhuan naturally needed to leave a backup plan. Otherwise, if he encountered a crisis, he would be able to leave calmly. After setting up the teleportation array, Zhuan and Bloodscale were teleported away. Not long after they were teleported away, ripples appeared in the black hole barrier in front of them. Then, 2 figures with powerful auras appeared. At first glance, these 2 people looked like humans. However, there was a strange suction force around them. The rocks that floated past them were sucked into nothingness. This is the 8 heavens? The energy here is so thin. These 2 people were extremely tall. They looked like young men in their 20s. However, they were 3 meters tall, much taller than the average human. One of the golden-clothed young men suddenly frowned. He looked ahead with a suspicious expression. "What's wrong, Jin Lin?" The white-clothed young man beside the golden-clothed young man suddenly asked. The golden-clothed young man did not answer the white-clothed young man. Instead, he took a step forward and grabbed at the void with his right hand. Suddenly, the space in front of him was torn to pieces like a piece of paper. "It's a concealment array. I don't know what the Black Smoke King is up to. He clearly informed the king of my clan that he sent you and me here. However, the Black Smoke King dares not to welcome us personally. How presumptuous!" The golden-clothed young man snorted coldly. The white-clothed young man pointed at the starry sky in front of them and said, "Jean Lin, look ahead. Isn't that the Black Smoke tribe? They might be here to welcome us." The golden-clothed young man raised his head and looked at the densely packed Black Smoke tribe tens of thousands of miles away. He frowned slightly. He realized that these Black Smoke tribe members were aggressive. Something was wrong. However, when he recalled that the two of them were sent by the Devouring King, these Xiaohe Smoke tribe members would not dare to act recklessly. Therefore, he was not too worried. It was only when countless Black Smoke tribe members covered the sky and covered the earth that their attacks landed on the golden-clothed young man and the white-clothed young man did the two of them realize that these Black Smoke tribe members were not here to welcome them. Instead, they were here to attack them. "You dare to attack our great devouring clan?" The golden-clothed young man shouted angrily. He wanted to use the name of the devouring clan to intimidate these impudent Black Smoke tribe members. However, the golden-clothed young man's words completely infuriated these Black Smoke tribe members. It must be those two from the devouring clan. Before our king died, he sent us a message. He was ambushed by two from the devouring clan and a human. It is said that the two from the devouring clan disguised themselves as Sajwa and his followers to ambush him. Damn it. Our king clearly welcomed you personally and even brought you to welcome the experts from the devouring clan. You actually ambushed our king and caused his death. Do you think that our Black Smoke tribe is easy to bully? What nonsense are you spouting? Just kill these two bastards. So what if they are from the devouring clan? This is not the primitive heavenly region. It has long been the territory of our Black Smoke tribe. Just two from the devouring clan. Kill them. Instantly, the endless attacks of the Black Smoke tribe members became more and more terrifying as they poured down on them. The golden-clothed young man and the white-clothed young man's faces changed drastically. They used all of their skills to resist the endless attacks. However, they were baffled. The two of them had just arrived in the 8 heavenly regions. They had not even seen the Black Smoke King yet, but they were already attacked by the endless Black Smoke tribe members. Moreover, these Black Smoke tribe members said that the two of them had killed their Black Smoke King. This was simply ridiculous. Although the golden-clothed young man and the white-clothed young man were confused, they knew that the two of them had taken the blame for someone else. "Jean Lin, what should we do?" The white-clothed young man's face was extremely ugly as he looked at the golden-clothed young man beside him. The golden-clothed young man roared, "We must have been set up by someone else. There are too many of these Black Smoke tribe members. Let's go back to the primitive heavenly region." Chapter 25:37. May you just message, bastard. Someone actually set up a defensive formation here. Break for me. The golden-clothed young man cursed. With a roar, he revealed his huge golden beast body. His huge beast claws cut through the starry sky and heavily slammed into the defensive array. Immediately, the array was smashed into countless pieces. However, it was this defensive formation that delayed his most precious time to escape. The Black Smoke tribe at the front naturally guessed the golden-clothed youth's intention. Then, countless Black Smoke tribe members rushed in from the front, pushing the golden-clothed youth and the white-clothed youth away. Even though the two devouring clan members had revealed their true forms and their strength had increased greatly, there were too many Black Smoke tribe members. They were densely packed and attacked without any regard for their lives. The two devouring clan members could only be pushed further and further away from the boundary. In the empty 10th floor of the Pill Tower in Pill Furnace City, ripples appeared in space. Then, two figures appeared on the 10th floor. After entering the Pill Tower, Zhuan immediately extended his soul consciousness to the outside world. He found that Pill Furnace City and even the Pill Furnace Star area were empty. There was not a single Black Smoke tribe member. In the star areas around the Pill Furnace Star area, there was basically no sign of the Black Smoke tribe. Zhuan knew that the Black Smoke King must have summoned them to the northern part of the heaven region. Let's disguise ourselves as the Black Smoke tribe again and leave the Six Desires heavenly region immediately. I think the Black Smoke tribe members will realize it soon. When that time comes, we won't be able to escape. As Zhuan spoke, he disguised himself as a member of the Black Smoke tribe again. Bloodscale also nodded. After disguising themselves as members of the Black Smoke tribe, the two of them quietly left the Pill Furnace Star area. After discovering that there were basically no Black Smoke tribe members around, Zhuan immediately took out the space-time wheel and quickly flew toward the border of the Six Desires heavenly region. Half a day later, the space-time wheel landed on the Steel Continent at the border of the Six Desires heavenly region. On the way from the Pill Furnace Star area to the Steel Continent, Zhuan basically did not see any Black Smoke tribe members. However, when he arrived at the Steel Continent, he immediately discovered that there were thousands of Black Smoke tribe members on the continent. Fortunately, Zhuowen's consciousness had already sensed that something was wrong with this Steel Continent, so he had already put away the space-time wheel before entering. Otherwise, the Black Smoke tribe would definitely suspect a flying divine artifact. The entrance of Zhuowen and Bloodscale didn't elicit any reaction from the Black Smoke tribe on the Steel Continent. At most, some of them glanced at Zhuowen and Bloodscale before casually floating around the continent. "Brother, our king has fallen. Why don't you help the other clansmen kill the real culprit?" Zhuowen casually pulled a Black Smoke race member aside and asked politely. The Black Smoke race member sized up Zhuowen and said coldly, "This is the border of the Heaven region. We were ordered by our king to guard this place and try to break the seal of this border. Don't you know this?" Zhuowen smiled awkwardly and said, "I'm sorry, I was too worried about my king's safety that I didn't think of it. We have so many clansmen. What can two devouring clan members do? Moreover, those two devouring clan members are only at the peak of the life and death realm. With such strength, they will definitely die. By the time we get there, I'm afraid those two devouring clan members will already be dead," the Black Smoke race member said indifferently. After the Black Smoke race member left, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a contemplative look. He didn't expect the devouring king of the great desolate heaven region to send two devouring clan members. However, these two devouring clan members were only at the peak of the life and death realm. Their strength was a little too low. Those two devouring clan members must have been sent by the devouring king to test the Black Smoke king. Naturally, he didn't send the real elites. After all, the Six Desires Heaven region is currently the territory of the Black Smoke race. Moreover, the entrance is controlled by the Black Smoke king. The devouring king won't easily send the real elites of the devouring clan here, Bloodscale said. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. His gaze passed over the Steel Continent and landed on the end of the continent. He discovered that there was indeed an extremely powerful restriction at the end of the continent. With Zhuowen's eyesight, he discovered that the restriction was actually a level 9 defensive formation. The power of this defensive formation was even more exquisite and powerful than the defensive formation that Zhuowen had set up. Obviously, it wasn't set up by an ordinary level 9 Divine Array Master. At this moment, there were many Black Smoke race members guarding the edge of the defensive formation. There were also other Black Smoke race members observing the defensive formation. They seemed to be trying to find some clues from the defensive formation. Zhuowen's consciousness entered the defensive formation. He wasn't worried about being suspected by the other Black Smoke race members because the other Black Smoke race members observing the defensive formation also sent their consciousness into the defensive formation. This wasn't strange at all. However, the moment Zhuowen's consciousness entered the defensive formation, a wave of fluctuation actually came from the defensive formation. Then, a familiar voice rang out in Zhuowen's mind. "Brother Zhuo, I'll be waiting for you in the river of space-time quicksand. Come quickly." Zhuowen retracted his consciousness and focused his gaze. He wasn't unfamiliar with that voice. Wasn't it the voice of Ma Yujie, who he hadn't seen in a long time? Speaking of the river of space-time quicksand, Zhuowen thought of the mysterious head. He still had the mysterious head's left eye and heart in his spirit ring. He had inherited Miao Bang's memories from the true dragon blood pool. He knew that the mysterious head's owner was called Xue Wuhan and was very powerful. There was still some time before Xue Wuhan's appointment, so Zhuowen wasn't in a hurry to return the left eye and heart. However, why did Ma Yujie want him to go into the river of space-time quicksand? However, there was one thing that Zhuowen was certain of. The defensive formation at the edge of the defensive formation was definitely set up by Ma Yujie. Otherwise, Ma Yujie wouldn't have left his consciousness in the defensive formation. Ma Yujie's consciousness must have sensed Zhuowen's aura, so he sent this strand of consciousness to Zhuon. How is it? Can you break this defensive formation? Bloodscale asked when he saw Zhuon in a daze. It's not easy to break it, but I have something to do now. I'm afraid I need to go somewhere. I need to leave the Iron Continent first. Then, Zhuon left the Iron Continent. Although Bloodscale was suspicious of Zhuowen's sudden change of heart, he could only follow him. Zhuon and Bloodscale's departure didn't attract the attention of the Black Smoke tribe on the Iron Continent. At most, some of them looked at the direction that Zhuon and Bloodscale had left in with surprise. They just wandered around the continent as if nothing had happened. When Zhuon left the Iron Continent for the River of Spacetime Quicksand, he realized that the number of Black Smoke tribe members around him had increased. Hence, Zhuon put away the spacetime wheel and drifted in the starry sky like the Black Smoke tribe members. It seems like the two devouring clan members have been dealt with, Bloodscale said in a low voice. Zhuon nodded. He knew that the Black Smoke tribe members had increased in number because they had returned from the northern part of the Heaven region. The return of these Black Smoke tribe members meant that the two devouring clan members would meet a miserable end. The two of them spent a few days before finally arriving at the River of Spacetime Quicksand. At this moment, there were no cultivators in the River of Spacetime Quicksand. There were only a few Black Smoke tribe members wandering around. Chapter 25:38. The birth of Traceless Blood. The Spacetime Quicksand River was divided into three regions, namely the Time region, the Space region, and the Spacetime region. Zhuon had already comprehended the spacetime law to great success, so the Spacetime Quicksand River didn't affect him at all. Of course, even if Zhuon hadn't comprehended the spacetime law, the Spacetime Quicksand River wouldn't affect him much with his current strength. After all, the spacetime law in the Spacetime Quicksand River wasn't complete and wasn't very powerful. It could only pose a significant obstacle to cultivators below the Void Sky 9th step. However, for cultivators above the Void Sky 9th step, the spacetime law in the Spacetime Quicksand River was probably child's play. Of course, even a Void Sky 9th step expert wouldn't have had a good time in the mystic realm that Zhuon had entered because that mystic realm was controlled by the mysterious head. Even though Zhuon was strong enough now, he was still very wary of the mysterious head. He knew that even though the mysterious head's body was incomplete, its strength was still far beyond that of a cultivator in the life and death boundary. After entering the Spacetime Quicksand River, Zhuon quickly passed through the time and space regions according to his memory and entered the third region, the Spacetime region. The Spacetime region was gray everywhere. This was a special color formed by the overlapping of the spacetime law and the space law. After walking in the spacetime region for 3 days, Zhuon stopped and looked ahead. What appeared in front of Zhuon was a beautiful world that was completely different from the gray and dim aura of the rest. Standing here, Zhuon felt like he was standing on a beach where the sun was about to set below the sea level. The red sunset glow was like a rainbow, forming a rainbow bridge over the sea in the distance. It also looked like flames devouring the sea level. It looked magnificent and majestic. Bloodscale, who was next to Zhuon, was stunned when he saw this scene. He immediately sighed and said, "It's really a beautiful place. The spacetime law here is really powerful. The place we're going to is the cliff at the end of the sea level." As Zhuon spoke, he pointed to the front. At the furthest point of the sunset, a cliff slowly stood on the surface of the sea, as if it was sending off the last ray of the setting sun. Bloodscale nodded. Although his face was still a little pale, his injuries were a little better than before. However, the side effects of using his trump card were too great, so he had to slowly recuperate to fully recover. Although the space-time law of this sea of sunset was terrifying, it did not affect Zhuon at all. Bloodscale was already extremely powerful, so it naturally did not affect him much. When the two of them arrived in front of the cliff, Zhuon subconsciously wanted to dive into the sea at the edge of the cliff. He found that the sea water was completely frozen at a certain point. He could not enter the bottom of the sea at all. "You've come." A deep voice slowly sounded out. Soon after, Zhuon discovered that a blood-red head had appeared above the cliff. The blood-colored head looked down at Zhuon indifferently, and there was a trace of excitement and anticipation in its indifferent eyes. Zhuan still could not see through the aura of the blood-colored head. He only felt that the blood-colored head was stronger than him, or even stronger than Bloodscale. This person is very powerful. Bloodscale only said a few words, but his eyes were filled with vigilance. Zhuan nodded. He also looked at the blood-colored head with some vigilance. At the same time, he secretly scanned the entire blood-colored cliff with his consciousness. He wanted to see where Ma Yujie was hiding. "Brother Zhua, are you looking for me?" Suddenly, a slightly sharp voice sounded, and a fat figure slowly walked out from the back of the cliff. Wasn't it Ma Yujie? Zhuan glanced at Ma Yujie, then looked at the blood-colored head above and said solemnly, "Senior, do you want me to fulfill our agreement?" The blood-colored head just stared at Zhuan without saying anything. Zhuan frowned, but he could not help but take a few steps back. But soon, he discovered that an extremely terrifying killing intent had firmly locked onto him, causing him to be frozen in place, unable to move. "Senior, what is the meaning of this?" Zhuan's eyes darkened. The blood-colored head said indifferently, "According to the agreement, you will hand over my left eye and heart. I won't make things difficult for you. After all, we've already reached an agreement. I won't attack you." Zhuan sneered inside. He knew that he had no other choice now, so he took out the mysterious eyeball and heart from his spirit ring. As soon as the mysterious eyeball appeared, it let out an excited hiss, then shot out and drilled into the blood-colored head's empty left eye, while the heart slowly floated beside the blood-colored head. "You've done well." The mysterious head revealed a satisfied expression, and then an extremely terrifying aura erupted from within the blood-colored cliff. Afterwards, the sea of sunset that had been frozen in place by the laws of space-time began to boil, and countless pillars of water shot up. Zhuan's heart sank, and he hurriedly retreated, but he was also struck by the terrifying aura, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. After retreating to a safe distance, Zhuan discovered that the blood-colored cliff had completely shattered. At the bottom of the blood-colored cliff, a headless body that was several feet long had actually rushed out. The headless body's limbs were bound by blood-red chains, and the left side of its chest was empty. Clearly, its heart had been dug out. With Zhuan's eyesight, he could naturally tell that the blood-red chains were condensed from space-time force. Moreover, the space-time force was far more terrifying than the sum of all the space-time force in the Sea of Sunset, or even the entire river of space-time quicksand. "Space-time Master, you've sealed me away for so long. Today I, Shui Wuhan, am finally free." The moment the headless body appeared, the blood-red head landed on the headless body, and then the beating heart shot into the left side of the headless body's chest. Rumble! Immediately, the entire Sea of Sunset shook even more terrifyingly. Even the Black Smoke clan that was far away from the river of space-time quicksand sensed the abnormalities in the river, and they were all surprised. "Shatter!" Shui Wuhan suddenly swung his hands, and the blood-red chains that bound his limbs immediately began to crack. Shui Wuhan constantly struggled, and more cracks appeared on the surface of the chains. In the end, they completely shattered, and Shui Wuhan regained his freedom. Shui Wuhan laughed heartily at the sky. His laughter was filled with delight and relief, and it even seemed a little crazy. At this moment, the Sea of Sunset began to boil even more violently. Waves of profound energy began to spread, and even from afar, Zhuan could sense the terror of the energy. As a result, he was forced to retreat even further. Chapter 25-39. The origin of Traceless Blood. Zhuan's eyes were extremely solemn. He knew that Traceless Blood's strength wasn't low, especially after inheriting the memories of Miao Bang. He knew that Traceless Blood was terrifying. It's just that he didn't expect that Traceless Blood was actually a powerhouse in the second step of Dao confirming. Now, he somewhat doubted whether Traceless Blood was a cultivator from one of the 8 heavens. It should be known that the 8 heavens don't even have a real powerhouse in the Dao confirming realm, let alone a powerhouse in the second step. In addition, Zhuan guessed that the space-time lord shouldn't be an ordinary person. Since he was able to seal such a terrifying powerhouse like Traceless Blood, Zhuan guessed that the space-time lord was also a powerhouse in the second step of Dao confirming. After Traceless Blood's body was completely reassembled, the energy of the entire Sea of Sunset, or rather, the entire space-time quicksand river, rushed madly into Traceless Blood's body. At this moment, Traceless Blood became the center of a huge vortex inside the space-time quicksand river. Feeling such a huge movement around him, Zhuowen's face changed slightly, and he quickly rushed out of the Sea of Sunset. At the same time, he summoned the phagocytosis to resist the tearing force formed by this terrifying energy vortex. Blood Scale hasn't fully recovered due to his serious injuries, so he was taken into the inner world by Zhuon to slowly recover. "Brother Ma, what the hell is going on? Shouldn't you explain it to me?" Zhuon turned his head and looked at Ma Yujie on the side. After Traceless Blood's body was reassembled, the latter immediately retreated to a spot not far away from Zhuon. Ma Yujie's fat face was still smiling. He looked at Zhuon and said, "This senior's name is Traceless Blood, and he came from the 9th heaven. I heard that he chased a powerhouse of the witch race to the 8 heavens in the past. Later, he had a conflict with the Space-Time Lord, and both sides suffered heavy losses. In the end, he was dismembered and suppressed here by the Space-Time Lord." Zhuon frowned slightly. He looked at Ma Yujie. Although he wasn't sure if what the latter said was true or false, he knew that Traceless Blood wasn't a cultivator from the 8 heavens. "Is the Space-Time Lord also from the 9th heaven?" Zhuon asked. Ma Yujie shook his head and said, "The Space-Time Lord isn't from the 9th heaven, but a powerhouse from the Space Beast race called the Great Desolate Heaven. I heard that the Space-Time Lord secretly followed the witch race powerhouse to the 8 heavens. I wonder if the witch race powerhouse has any secrets?" Zhuowen's heart trembled. He was sure that the sorcerer tribe expert that Ma Yujie was talking about was the Miao tribe. Miao Bang's strength was not considered strong. He was probably only at primordial chaos master's level. He was still quite far away from the second step of Dao validation. The Space-Time Master was definitely a second-step Dao validation expert. Since the Master of Time and Space had secretly followed Miao Bang here, he probably suspected that Miao Bang knew about the Zhuronggu. Later on, for some reason, he had a conflict with Traceless Blood. Thus, a great battle broke out, and both sides suffered. What Zhuon was worried about now was whether Traceless Blood knew the secret of Miao Bang. If he knew, Zhuon might also be suspected by him. At that time, he might be in danger. Generally speaking, Zhuon leaving the space-time quicksand river now is a wiser move, but he knows that once he leaves now, he will really be finished. Leaving means that he has a guilty conscience. With Traceless Blood's terrifying strength, once he recovers, catching him back is just a piece of cake. So leaving now will only make Traceless Blood suspicious. If he faces it openly, Traceless Blood won't think too much. "Brother Zhua, you should have entered the small world of the blood-stained cliff again, right? I don't know if you found the blood-colored Dao tree in the abyss of the cliff?" Ma Yujie suddenly said mysteriously. Zhuowen said seriously, "I did find the blood-colored Dao tree, but unfortunately, it can't be transplanted. Otherwise, I would have already transplanted it." Ma Yujie frowned. He didn't expect Zhuowen to not take the blood-colored Dao tree away. He sighed and said, "So that's how it is. Originally, the blood-colored Dao tree was quite useful to me. I originally planned to use the space-time key to exchange for it with Brother Zhua. Since that's the case, then forget it." When Zhuon heard that Ma Yujie was planning to use the space-time key to exchange with him, his expression changed. He changed his words and said, "Later on, I went again and used the Heavenly Way origin to successfully transplant the blood-colored Dao tree." Ma Yujie smiled, not minding that Zhuowen had suddenly changed his mind. Instead, he said in pleasant surprise, "If that's really the case, then that's great. If Brother Zhua doesn't mind, how about exchanging the space-time key with you for the blood-red Dao tree?" Zhuon had some doubts in his heart. He knew Ma Yujie's character very well. This guy wouldn't make a deal where he would lose out. Zhuon had also studied the blood-colored Dao tree. Apart from being able to produce Dao fruits and having a strong Dao aura, there didn't seem to be anything special about it. He didn't know what Ma Yujie was selling. Although the space-time key is precious, you still need to collect 3. One is no different from having none. Zhuowen said awkwardly. The corner of Ma Yujie's eyes twitched. He quickly took out 10 Dao fruits from his spirit ring. At the same time, he took out a dozen supreme-grade starry sky divine veins and said, "With these, it should be enough." Zhuowen sneered in his heart. This Ma Yujie was really generous. He actually took out 10 Dao fruits at once. Back then, this guy had told him that he only had less than 10 Dao fruits. Now, he was showing his true colors. However, Zhuowen didn't care. He waved his sleeve and put away the Dao fruits and starry sky divine veins. At the same time, he took out the blood-colored Dao tree. This blood-colored Dao tree was of little value to him. Although he knew that this blood-colored Dao tree might not be ordinary, since Ma Yujie had taken a fancy to it, Zhuowen couldn't see through the use of this blood-colored Dao tree. It was useless to keep it by his side. It was better to exchange it for something useful to him. Zhuowen himself had comprehended a powerful space-time sacred art and had comprehended the laws of space-time. He was the best candidate to enter the space-time temple. Perhaps he could enter the space-time temple and gain a new understanding. At that time, his space-time sacred art would be completely perfected and become even stronger. Ma Yujie took the blood-colored Dao tree and checked it several times. Then he nodded with satisfaction and said, "Brother Zhuo, you really keep your word." Rumble. After Zhuowen and Ma Yujie completed the exchange, the entire river of space-time quicksand exploded. Then Zhuowen was shocked to find that the huge river of space-time quicksand had completely collapsed. Then his gaze fell on Shui Wuhan, who was in the core area of the river of space-time quicksand. His heart trembled. He knew that Shui Wuhan had absorbed all the energy in the river of space-time quicksand. Chapter 2540. Loose black hole. When the space-time quicksand river had completely exploded, Zhuowen realized that the Black Smoke tribe, which had originally been few in number, had become extremely dense. Originally, the Black Smoke tribe had already noticed the abnormality of the space-time quicksand river. Now that the space-time quicksand river had completely exploded, revealing the 3 humans within, the Black Smoke tribe was stunned at first. Then they roared furiously. Bush, bush, bush. Countless Black Smoke tribe members flew toward Zhuowen and Ma Yujie in unison. Zhuowen looked at the endless Black Smoke tribe members around him. He estimated that there were at least a few 100,000 of them. Furthermore, he realized that the Black Smoke tribe members in the distance were also rushing over. The news of the 3 humans appearing here would probably spread quickly throughout the Black Smoke tribe. At that time, they would not be facing just a few 100,000 Black Smoke tribe members. They would be facing the entire Black Smoke tribe members. Zhuowen and Ma Yujie subconsciously retreated behind Shui Wuhan. They knew that Shui Wuhan was very powerful. Furthermore, the space-time quicksand river had been destroyed because of him. Naturally, they would seek his protection. Shui Wuhan did not care about Zhuowen and Ma Yujie's little actions. Instead, he looked at the Black Smoke tribe members surging over and snorted coldly. Mere Black Smoke tribe members, the lowest race in the Eldritch domain, dare to be impudent in front of me? With that, Shui Wuhan grabbed at the air with his right hand. Instantly, 4 huge blood-red whirlpools appeared around him, covering 4 directions around him. The 4 blood-red whirlpools were like a meat grinder, constantly grinding the Black Smoke tribe members in the surroundings into pieces. The more Black Smoke tribe members there were, the stronger the blood-red whirlpools became. Zhuowen watched the Black Smoke tribe members being ground into pieces. His heart was filled with reverence. Zhuowen knew very well that if he faced the blood-red whirlpools head-on, his end would not be any better than the Black Smoke tribe members. Traceless blood was worthy of being a second-step Dao confirming expert. The move he revealed was actually so powerful. Furthermore, from the expression on Shui Wuhan's face, this move was just a casual move. In just 10 breaths of time, the hundreds of thousands of Black Smoke race members around the space-time river of quicksand had been wiped out. More Black Smoke race members were surging in from afar. However, when the Black Smoke race discovered that hundreds of thousands of their brethren had been killed, they all revealed terrified expressions. Zhuowen discovered that many of the Black Smoke race in the distance were already retreating. They were beginning to distance themselves from the space-time river of quicksand. Shui Wuhan glanced indifferently at the Black Smoke tribe in the distance. With a wave of his sleeve, the 4 blood-colored vortexes rushed out and landed in the middle of the Black Smoke tribe. Instantly, more and more Black Smoke tribe members were sucked into the blood-red whirlpool and exterminated. In the confrontation between Traceless Shui and the Black Smoke tribe, Traceless Shui had the absolute upper hand. Moreover, it was a one-sided massacre. The Black Smoke tribe didn't even have the power to resist. When he saw this scene of devastation, Zhuan felt that the Black Smoke race was rather pitiful for the first time. They had encountered someone as ruthless as Traceless Shui, so they were basically being tortured to death. After Traceless Shui had basically wiped out all the Black Smoke race in this region of space, he finally stopped. He looked at Zhuan and said, "It looks like the doors of profundity of the 8 heavens have been opened. Who blasted them open?" Zhuan didn't dare to be negligent in front of Traceless Shui. He cupped his fists and said in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing, "Senior, the doors of profundity were blasted open by 6 heavens lords." Apparently, it was the idea of Sakyamuni from the Nadi Shiva domain. Zhuan immediately put the blame on Sakyamuni. He and Sakyamuni had long been mortal enemies. Although the Nadi Shiva hadn't appeared since Palace Master Wujue had been killed, Yuan had a premonition. However, Zhuan kept having a bad premonition. If he wasn't wrong, then Sakura was probably a half-step Heaven Dao Lord. In addition, he hadn't appeared for dozens of years. Jun guessed that the Nadi Shiva was probably in seclusion. The only possibility for Sakyamuni to be in seclusion was that he was confident that he could successfully validate his Dao. Once Sakyamuni succeeded in validating his Dao and became the Heavenly Dao Master, Yuan knew that he would be in trouble. No matter how strong his 3 extreme realms were or how terrifying his space-time ability was, there was still a big gap between him and the Heavenly Dao Master. When that happened, he would be in trouble. Zhuan was actually looking forward to seeing if Traceless Shui could deal with the Nadi Shiva. If he could, he would be able to help him get rid of a huge threat. Unfortunately, Zhuan was disappointed to find that Traceless Shui only nodded. He continued to ask, "Then, other than the Black Smoke race, are there any other races that have entered the 8 heavens?" "Not yet." Zhuan explained the current situation of the 8 heavens. Since Traceless Shui came from the Xianmi heavenly domain of the 9th heaven, he should know about the threat of the primitive heavenly domain. If he could use Traceless Shui to eliminate all the Black Smoke race in the 6 Desires heavenly domain and seal the boundary, that would be the best. The 8 heavens are very important to the Xianmi heavenly domain. We can't let the alien races from the primitive heavenly domain invade. Take me to the door of profundity. We must strengthen the boundary and seal it, Traceless Shui said solemnly. Zhuan nodded and took Traceless Shui and Ma Yujie to the northern part of the heavenly domain. Along the way, the number of Black Smoke race members increased. Zhuan knew that the 2 devouring clan members had been killed. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many Black Smoke race members on the road. As expected, when Traceless Shui led Zhuan and Ma Yujie past, all the Black Smoke race members threw themselves at them without any regard for their lives. Unfortunately, these Black Smoke race members weren't even ants in front of Traceless Shui. They were killed easily. Along the way, Traceless Shui encountered tens of millions of Black Smoke race members. Unfortunately, they were all killed by Traceless Shui with a single strike. Therefore, many Black Smoke race members avoided Traceless Shui before they met him. They didn't dare to get close to the terrifying human race. Although the Black Smoke race hated the human race, they couldn't sacrifice themselves when facing an existence that was far stronger than them. Saving their lives was the most important thing. When the 3 of them arrived at the black hole boundary, Traceless Shui's eyes became extremely solemn. Even Zhuan was shocked to find that the black hole was several times bigger than when he had left. All the restrictions he had placed on the black hole boundary had disappeared. Zhuan guessed that the 2 members of the devouring clan had destroyed those restrictions. Perhaps they knew that they had been tricked, so they had used this method to take revenge. I didn't think that the passage to the 8 heavenly domains would be opened again. Suddenly, an extremely evil voice came from the black hole. This voice contained a powerful force that could shake one's soul. Zhuan knew that the owner of this voice was definitely a top expert. Zhuan didn't think that the experts of the primitive heavenly domain would discover the black hole boundary so quickly. From this evil voice, Zhuan could feel that the owner of this voice wasn't much weaker than traceless Shui. Chapter 2541. Ma Yujie and Wuhan Shui's departure. Bang. 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 A huge black arm suddenly stretched out from the black hole. This black arm was as thin as firewood, and it looked extremely strange. Traceless Blood's fist suddenly collided with the black arm. Immediately, terrifying ripples erupted one after another. Then, the surrounding space exploded. After Traceless Blood threw a punch, he twisted his waist and quickly threw out hundreds of punches. Each punch carried an extremely pungent smell of blood, and the energy within it was extremely terrifying. The black arm clearly did not expect Wuhan Shui to suddenly attack so violently. In an instant, the arm was smashed into pieces. An extremely unwilling groan came from the black hole. The moment the owner of the evil voice was blasted into the black hole, Wuhan Shui formed a seal with both hands. Then, blood-red energy gushed out and formed an extremely complicated blood-red magic array in front of the black hole. The moment Zhuan saw the blood-red magic array, his pupils shrank. He could not understand the patterns of the blood-red magic array at all. After all, he was a level 9 divine array master. What kind of array was this that even he couldn't understand? Brother Zhua, this is the blood-red meteor array. It is a heavenly fate level magic array. Ordinary heavenly fate masters cannot break this blood-red meteor array. To break this blood-red meteor array, one must at least have the strength of profound theory master, Ma Yujie explained calmly. Zhuan's eyes flashed. He had already learned about the Tao Proving Realm from Bloodscale. He knew that heavenly fate masters were the first major realm of the second step of Tao Proving Realm. Even in the untainted heavenly realm, experts at this realm were considered extremely powerful. Profound Theory Master was the second major realm of the second step of Tao Proving Realm. The number of experts at this level was pitifully small. Of course, this was only relative to the vast number of creatures in the heavenly realm. After setting up the bloody light meteor formation, Shui Wuhan nodded to Zhuan seriously. Then he looked at Ma Yujie and said, "This bloody light meteor formation can only last for 20 years at most. If the experts of Lord Xuanji from the untainted heavenly domain come out, the bloody light meteor formation will be broken immediately. I need to go back to the Xianmi heavenly region to inform the Emperor Kong Mountain." Ma Yujie revealed a respectful expression and immediately cupped his hands at Shui Wuhan. "Senior, please take me with you. I found this by accident. I hope you will kindly accept it." With that, Ma Yujie took out a blood knife and a blood-colored Dao tree from his spirit ring and handed them to Shui Wuhan. Zhuan's pupils shrank. He finally understood why Ma Yujie wanted to trade with him. It turned out that he wanted to return the blood-colored Dao tree to Shui Wuhan and ask Shui Wuhan to take him back to the Xianmi heavenly domain. From the looks of it, Ma Yujie should also be a cultivator from the Xianmi heavenly domain. Zhuan was also familiar with the blood knife that Ma Yujie handed over. It was the same blood knife that Miao Bang saw before he died. However, the blood knife now looked rusty and there were many cracks on its surface. It should have been damaged in a battle. After seeing the blood knife and the blood-colored Dao tree in Ma Yujie's hand, Shui Wuhan's calm eyes were filled with a trace of fanaticism and excitement. However, he quickly restrained it. Shui Wuhan calmly put away the blood-colored Dao tree and the blood knife. Then he nodded at Ma Yujie and said, "Not bad. Help me find the blood Dao tree and the blood soul carry. I can take you across the heavenly moat and enter the Xianmi heavenly domain." Ma Yujie's eyes were calm. He cupped his hands at Shui Wuhan and said, "Thank you, senior. When will you go out?" Shui Wuhan waved his sleeve. Ma Yujie only felt his body shake. Then he and Shui Wuhan disappeared from where they were. Zhuan looked at the disappearing Shui Wuhan with a calm gaze. After Shui Wuhan recovered, he had not looked at him from beginning to end. Perhaps in his eyes, Wuhan was just an ant. It was natural for him to bring Shui Wuhan's left eye and heart. Of course, Zhuan did not intend to ask for any benefits from Shui Wuhan. Shui Wuhan was much stronger than him. It was good enough that he did not kill him. It was simply a fool's dream to ask for any benefits. Zhuan looked at the space-time key in his hand and shook his head. He knew that he still needed one more key to enter the space-time temple. At present, he had no clue about the third space-time key. Zhuan regretted that he had impulsively exchanged the space-time key with Ma Yujie. However, he also knew that the space-time master could trap an expert like Xue Wuhan. It could be seen that the space-time master was also an expert in the second step of the Tao confirming realm. The cave abode of such an expert would definitely have good treasures. If he could find the third space-time key, its value would definitely far exceed that of the blood-colored Tao tree. Zhuan released Blood Scale. The latter looked at Zhuan in confusion and asked, "Where are you going now?" Zhuan glanced at the blood-colored seal at the boundary and said, "This boundary has been sealed by Xue Wuhan. I think the alien tribes in the untainted heavenly realm won't be able to break it for a while. We should leave the Six Desires heavenly realm." Blood Scale nodded and said, "Can you break the seal at the boundary of the heavenly realm?" After Zhuan finished speaking, he left the place. After the exchange with him, Ma Yujie told him how to break the seal. Of course, he also gave him a new array disk. The array disk was given to him together with the space-time key. After Zhuan completely broke the seal, he would reseal the boundary exit. When Zhuan went out this time, he planned to spread the news of the situation in the Six Desires heavenly realm. Almost 90% of the Black Smoke clan had been wiped out by Xue Wuhan, and the Black Smoke King had also been killed by Zhuo Wen and Xue Lin. It could be said that the Black Smoke tribe in the Six Desires heavenly realm was no longer a threat. When he returned to the Steel Continent, Zhuan discovered that the number of Black Smoke tribe members had increased by a lot. There had only been a few thousand of them at first, but now there were nearly 10,000 of them. Moreover, the Black Smoke tribe members on the Steel Continent all looked very impetuous. Zhuan knew that these Black Smoke tribe members might have come to seek refuge. After all, Xue Wuhan was too invincible. No matter how many Black Smoke tribe members besieged him, they would basically die. After witnessing the terror of Xue Wuhan, the Black Smoke tribe was truly terrified. Zhuan could even feel that these Black Smoke tribe members on the Steel Continent were all trembling. Zhuan glanced at the seal and discovered that it was intact. He knew that Xue Wuhan probably didn't leave the Six Desires heavenly realm from here. Perhaps an expert like Xue Wuhan didn't even need to use such a method to leave the heavenly realm. He probably directly tore through the heavenly realm's barrier and entered the extraterritorial starry sky. Blood Scale, how are your injuries? Zhuan suddenly looked at Blood Scale and asked. Blood Scale seemed to know Zhuowen's plan. He said lightly, "Although I haven't fully recovered, dealing with these Black Smoke tribe members shouldn't be a problem." "All right, then follow me and kill all the Black Smoke tribe members on the Steel Continent." As he spoke, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with murderous intent. The black smoke around him immediately dispersed. He took out the Emperor's sword and violently swung it dozens of times. Chapter 2542. Back in the Long River Galaxy, the Black Smoke tribe on the Steel Continent were caught off guard when the boundless sword Qi swept across the sky. Many of them were annihilated by the terrifying sword Qi. What's going on? Who ambushed us? It can't be that terrifying expert, right? No, I don't want to face that terrifying expert. He's definitely much stronger than our king. Let's run. I've seen this person before. He's with that expert. Since he's here, that expert is probably not far away. When Zhuan unleashed the sword Qi and was about to attack again, he realized that the Black Smoke tribe did not fight back. Instead, they screamed and fled like headless flies. What's going on? Xue Lin, who was about to attack, looked at the Black Smoke tribe members who were running around like headless flies. These Black Smoke tribe must be afraid of Xue Wuhan. Zhuan looked helpless. From the Black Smoke tribe's behavior, he could tell that Xue Wuhan had left a huge shadow in their hearts. Although he was not Xue Wuhan, he had appeared beside Xue Wuhan before. Naturally, the Black Smoke tribe thought that he was one of Xue Wuhan's men. Xue Wuhan had not even come, but the Black Smoke tribe was already so scared. If he came personally, the Black Smoke tribe would surrender immediately. Blood Scale looked at Zhuowen in confusion. He wanted to ask for the latter's opinion. Kill. The Black Smoke tribe is a disaster after all. If we can get rid of them, we have to. Zhuan shouted coldly. With that, Yuan took a step forward. At the same time, he summoned his doppelganger and began to kill the Black Smoke tribe that had escaped from the Steel Continent. The moment Zhuowen made his move, Xue Lin followed suit. Because the Black Smoke tribe was traumatized by Xue Wuhan, they had already been defeated. When they saw Zhuowen and Bloodscale charging at them, their first thought was not to fight back but to escape. Because of this thought, Zhuowen and Bloodscale did not have much trouble killing the Black Smoke tribe. Soon, almost all the Black Smoke tribe on the Steel Continent had been wiped out by the two of them. Other than a few lucky Black Smoke tribe members who managed to escape, the Steel Continent was now filled with their corpses. Zhuowen waved his sleeve and unleashed his pill fire. He incinerated all the corpses of the Black Smoke clan members on the Steel Continent. Then he walked to the seal. Zhuowen took. Zhuowen placed the disc. Ma yu jie. Zhuowen put. Of Zhuowen took Studio Ma. About an hour later, the seal was completely unsealed under the operation of the array disc. Zhuowen and Bloodscale looked at each other and left the Six Desires heavenly domain. Of course, Zhuowen did not forget to activate the array disc before he left. Soon after, a new seal appeared at the border exit. It had to be said that Ma Yujie's array Dao level was really amazing. Originally, Zhuowen thought that Ma Yujie was a Tier 9 God Array Dao Master. Now, Zhuowen found that he couldn't see through Ma Yujie's true array Dao level. At the very least, the array formation patterns contained in Ma Yujie's disc array were extremely complicated. Zhuowen only understood half of it. Thinking of this, Zhuowen sighed in his heart. He knew that he was a frog in a well. He didn't know that there was an even more powerful array Dao above a grade 9 array Dao Divine Master. Therefore, he thought that Ma Yujie was a grade 9 array Dao Divine Master. Now, he did not think so. Ma Yujie's array Dao had surpassed a level 9 Divine Array Master. However, Zhuowen did not know what level he was at. After all, he did not know what was above a level 9 Divine Array Master. Ma Yujie had never told him. As for Xue Lin, he was from the Untainted Heavenly Realm. Since the Untainted Heavenly Realm didn't use many restrictive formations, Xue Lin's knowledge of formations was much weaker than Zhuowen's. Bloodscale, take my identity token back to the Wenxue Palace in the Brahma Heavenly Domain. My identity token contains the route to the Wenxue Palace. Also, take this crystal ball. It records the specific situation in the Six Desires Heavenly Domain. Give it to my wife, Muchenxue. Ask her to make many copies of it and spread it out. Zhuowen took out a jade token and a crystal ball. He handed them to Bloodscale. Bloodscale hesitated for a moment. Then, he nodded and parted ways with Zhuowen. After watching Bloodscale's figure disappear from sight, Zhuowen withdrew his gaze. He stood in the void and looked in the direction of the Hua Xia Heavenly Domain. He murmured, after so many years, I'm going back to the Hua Xia Heavenly Domain again. In the main city of the Long River Galaxy, the Long River Star Lord, Chi-Chi, sat on the main seat with a solemn expression. There were several people sitting below him. These people were the upper echelons of the Long River Galaxy. However, they were all frowning. Even Chi-Chi was sighing. My lord, what should we do? That expert wants us to hand over the Long River Galaxy within 10 days. We don't have anything good in the Long River Galaxy. Why does that expert want the Long River Galaxy? A middle-aged man sighed. Chi-Chi, who was sitting on the main seat, frowned. His gaze was gloomy. In fact, even he was puzzled. Their Long River Galaxy was a relatively remote galaxy. How could an ordinary void sky expert take a fancy to their Long River Galaxy? However, that void sky expert took a fancy to his Long River Galaxy and ordered them to move away within 10 days. Should we report this matter to the Tai Ching Immortal Realm? Another person asked tentatively. Chi-Chi smiled bitterly and shook his head. The Tai Ching Immortal Realm won't care about such a trivial matter. Even if we report this matter to the Tai Ching Immortal Realm, we'll still have to give up the Long River Galaxy. Moreover, we might become enemies with that void sky expert. The hall fell into silence. The upper echelons were silent and no longer spoke. Everyone, get ready. We must move all the living beings in the galaxy away within 10 days. Otherwise, that void sky expert won't show mercy. Chi sighed softly. The upper echelons in the hall cupped their hands towards Chi and immediately left the hall. Obviously, they were going to arrange the living beings in the galaxy according to Chi's instructions. Chi slumped in his seat. Suddenly, he saw a white-robed youth appear silently in front of the hall. This white-robed youth gave him a familiar feeling. However, Chi soon realized that something was wrong. How did this white-robed youth come in? He didn't notice at all. It was as if he had always been there. "Or you?" Chi asked with a frightened expression. The white-robed youth slowly raised his head and looked indifferently at Chi. "Brother Chi, can't you recognize me? You are..." Chapter 25:43. Secrets of the Boundless Taishu. When Chi recognized Zhuo Wen, his heart was like a stormy sea. When Zhuo Wen left the Tian domain of Huaxia, he had left behind a great reputation. Even now, when Zhuo Wen's name was mentioned in the Tian domain of Huaxia, almost no one didn't know him. There was no other reason. It was mainly because of what Zhuo Wen had done in the Grand Clarity Immortal Realm. As a mere heaven god, he had single-handedly defeated the Blood God Hall and killed 9 of the 10 protectors of the Blood God Hall. He had almost killed the first protector, Xuejian, and injured the master of the Blood God Hall. The creatures of the Huaxia Heaven Domain were all familiar with the Blood Shrine, and their expressions all changed when they heard about it. Although the Blood Divine Hall was not the strongest hall in the Taiching Immortal Realm, it was the most difficult and terrifying hall to deal with. As long as one was targeted by the assassins of the Blood Divine Hall, one would basically die. However, Zhuo Wen had destroyed the Blood God Temple in one fell swoop when he was only a heavenly god. He had killed almost all of the assassins in the Blood God Temple and even injured the Blood God. This had shaken the entire Huaxia Heaven region. The reason why Zhuo Wen was so famous was mainly because Zhuo Wen's cultivation was too low back then. However, he was able to accomplish such an incredible feat. It was not difficult to understand why he was praised by everyone. At this moment, the white-robed young man in front of him had no aura at all. He looked ordinary, but Chi did not dare to underestimate him. Back then, Zhuo Wen had caused such a huge commotion and suddenly disappeared for hundreds of years, but Chi knew how terrifying this young man was. With Zhuo Wen's talent and strength, Chi knew that he was definitely a Void Sky Realm expert. According to his estimation, Zhuo Wen's cultivation should be around 2nd Ascension Void Sky. Of course, this was only Chi-Chi's guess. At the same time, he also thought of the Void Sky powerhouse who had forced the Long River Galaxy. He looked at the white-robed young man in front of him with a hint of hope in his eyes. Although Chi was unable to discern the young man's exact cultivation, he could sense that the young man was even more unfathomable than before. If he could get Zhuo Wen's support, Chi knew that the Void Sky powerhouse who was forcing the Long River Galaxy would hesitate to take action. He might even give up on the Long River Galaxy. Zhuo Wen looked at Chi indifferently. Chi-Chi's cultivation level had improved a few hundred years ago. He was already a 2-calamity true god. However, this bit of cultivation was no different from an ant in his eyes. The reason he had come to the Long River Galaxy was naturally to ask Chi about the route to the Boundless Taishu. Zhuo Wen hadn't stayed in the Huaxia Heaven Domain for long. He had only stayed in the Long River Galaxy and the Taiching Immortal Realm. As for the Wuji Taishu, although it was famous in the Huaxia Heaven Domain, Zhuo Wen didn't know anything about it. Although the Long River Galaxy was a galaxy at the edge of the Huaxia Heaven territory and was relatively remote, Chi was still a member of the Huaxia Heaven territory and had stayed in this galaxy for countless years. Zhuo Wen knew that Chi should know the route to the Boundless Taishu. Chi quickly broke the silence and came up to greet him warmly. His eyes were fervent as he said, "Lord Zhuo, your presence brings light to this humble Chi's humble dwelling." Chi hurriedly invited Zhuo Wen to the head of the 2 rows of seats in the hall. His face was as bright as a blooming chrysanthemum. Zhuo Wen just nodded and sat down leisurely. He silently looked at the enthusiastic Chi. He could tell from Chi-Chi's attitude and expression that the latter had something to ask of him. "Brother Chi, You can just call me Brother Zhuo, Zhuowen said indifferently. Chi looked a little embarrassed. Zhuowen's actions back then were too earth-shattering. After Chi recognized Zhuowen, he naturally changed the way he addressed him. However, the embarrassment on Chi-Chi's face quickly disappeared and he said with a smile, "Then I'll have to offend you." Zhuowen nodded and said indifferently, "I'm revisiting an old place. I have something to ask of Brother Chi." Chi was delighted when he heard this. He had something to ask of Zhuowen in the first place. Now that he hadn't mentioned it yet, Zhuowen had taken the initiative to mention it. He was naturally overjoyed and hurriedly said, "Brother Zhuo, feel free to mention it. As long as I, Chi, am able to do it, I will definitely not refuse." Chi originally had something to ask of him. Now that Zhuowen had brought it up first, he knew that if he asked Zhuowen to help him later, the latter would probably agree to his request on account of their friendship. "I need the route to the boundless Taishu. Do you have it?" Zhuowen asked. Chi-Chi's face stiffened and he immediately looked at Zhuowen in disbelief. "Brother Zhuo, you want to go to the boundless Taishu? Is there a problem with me going to the boundless Taishu?" Zhuowen asked with a frown when he saw Chi-Chi's strange expression. Chi sighed. "Brother Zhuo, perhaps you still don't know the situation in the boundless Taishu? The boundless Taishu is a great treasure land in the Huaxia heavenly domain. At the same time, it's also very dangerous. I heard that even Void Sky 9 Steps experts are in danger of dying if they enter. Brother Zhuo, you're probably planning to enter the boundless Taishu to search for treasures, right? However, I advise you to give up on that idea because the boundless Taishu is now more dangerous than before. I heard that the Hall Master of the North Dock Hall, Perfected North Dock, who is ranked third in the 100 halls of the Taiching Immortal Realm, entered the boundless Taishu a few months ago and completely died there. Perfected North Dock was a life enlightenment realm expert. If even such an expert died..." As he spoke, Chi glanced at Zhuowen and shook his head without saying anything. Although he knew that Zhuowen was not simple, he also knew that the strength of the white-clothed youth in front of him naturally could not be compared to Perfected North Dock. He was simply courting death. Even a life enlightenment realm expert died there? Zhuowen muttered to himself with a strange look in his eyes. Zhuowen had entered many dangerous places. Whether it was the waning waxing moons, the skeleton world, or the river of spacetime quicksand, they were all extremely dangerous places. However, whether it was the waning waxing moons, the skeleton world, or the river of spacetime quicksand, Zhuowen knew that it was impossible for a life enlightenment realm expert to die there. At most, it would injure him. After all, Zhuowen had just advanced to the life enlightenment realm and was very familiar with it. It should be known that when one's realm reached the life enlightenment realm, their body would produce mysterious life divine power endlessly. As long as their divine soul was not completely destroyed and the illusory sky bridge was not completely annihilated, it was basically very difficult to kill them. Back then, he had killed the Fragrant Desire Palace master of the Six Desires Palace because Yun was too abnormal. Whether it was the Death Chi or the Waning Sun above the sea, they were extremely restrained by the mysterious life divine power. In addition, the Fragrant Desire Palace master had underestimated his opponent. That was why Zhuowen had been able to kill her so easily. Of course, with Zhuowen's current strength, he could even kill an existence like Palace Master Wuju and was close to the level of the Nadi Shiva. Although Wuji Taishu was terrifying, Zhuowen did not plan to retreat. However, from what Chi had said, it seemed that Wuji Taishu was not that terrifying in the past. Brother Chi, is there any other reason why Wuji Taishu has become so dangerous? Zhuowen asked. Chapter 2544. The blue-haired Manzhuowen nodded and said indifferently, "Brother Chi, please give me the route to boundless Taishu." Brother Zhuowen, even a life enlightenment realm expert has fallen. Do you still intend to go? Chi looked at Zhuowen in surprise. Is a life enlightenment realm expert that powerful? Just because a life enlightenment realm expert has fallen in boundless Taishu doesn't mean that I, Zhuowen, will also fall in boundless Taishu. Although Zhuowen's tone was indifferent, his eyes were full of confidence. Zhuowen was no longer the little sky god who had just left Heavenly Armor Planet. He was now the ruler of Great Brahma and had killed several life enlightenment realm experts. There were very few in the 8 heavens that could threaten him. What did Zhuan have to fear? Chi shook his head inwardly, thinking that Zhuan was a little arrogant. Although what Zhuan had done back then was extremely sensational, he knew that Zhuan had relied on the power of Great Pure One's Tao intent and had only injured the Blood God at that time. The Blood God was the Hall Master of the Blood Divine Hall. There was still a gap between him and the Hall Master of the North Dock Hall, perfected North Dock. Zhuan could not even kill the Blood God back then, so he was naturally far inferior to perfected North Dock. Although it had been a few hundred years, Chi knew that Zhuan should have improved, but no matter how much he improved, he would at most advance to the Void Sky realm. As for the Life Enlightenment realm, how could such an extraordinary realm be achieved in a few hundred years? Seeing Chi-Chi's expression, Zhuan knew that the latter did not believe him at all. However, he did not care and said indifferently, "Brother Chi, I only want the route to boundless Taishu." Seeing that Zhuan didn't listen to his advice, Chi simply stopped talking. He immediately took out a jade slip from his spirit ring and handed it to Zhuan. "Brother Zhua, this jade slip records the approximate route to boundless Taishu. Also, I remember that boundless Taishu has been sealed off by many forces of the heaven domain. Something big might have happened inside, so be careful." Zhuan frowned slightly as he took the jade slip. He checked it and found that the route in the jade slip was too rough. If he followed the rough route in the jade slip, he might not be able to reach Wuji Taishu. There should be some deviation. What Zhuan needed was a specific route, not a rough map like this. Fortunately, the approximate route was recorded on the map. Zhuan only needed to roughly deduce the route and he should be able to reach boundless Taishu easily. "Thank you, Brother Chi." Zhuan cupped his fists and looked at Chi silently. He knew that Chi probably had something to ask of him. Now that he had asked for the route, he naturally wouldn't leave after taking it. He wasn't that kind of person. Sure enough, Chi told him about his current predicament. It was about that Void Sky expert telling them to scram from the Long River Galaxy and wanting to occupy it. Zhuan's eyes revealed a strange expression. The Long River Galaxy could be said to be the outermost region of the Hua Xia heaven domain. It could be considered the weakest galaxy in the entire heaven domain. Not to mention Void Sky experts, even true gods were pitifully rare. Yet, someone had set his eyes on the Long River Galaxy. Moreover, the person who had set his eyes on the Long River Galaxy was a Void Sky expert. Could it be that there was some secret in the Long River Galaxy? Thinking of this, Zhuan's powerful consciousness radiated outwards and immediately encompassed the entire Long River Galaxy. When Chi felt Zhuan's powerful consciousness, his legs trembled and he almost fell to the ground. He looked at Zhuan in horror and his heart was in turmoil. What a powerful divine sense! How can Zhuan have such a powerful divine sense? Under this consciousness, Chi felt as if he had been stripped naked. There were no secrets on his body to speak of. After about a quarter of an hour, Zhuan withdrew his consciousness and furrowed his brows. Just now, he had used his divine sense to check the Long River Galaxy inside and out, but he didn't find anything strange about it. "Do you want me to help you drive away that Void Sky expert?" Zhuan came back to his senses and looked at Chi. Chi-Chi's face became even more respectful and he hurriedly said, "Yes, I hope that Brother Zhua can help me since you lived in the Long River Galaxy for a period of time." "Do you know the specific strength of that Void Sky expert?" Zhuan asked indifferently. Chi looked embarrassed and said, "This Chi's strength is low, so." Zhuan nodded and said, "Okay, I'll help you." "Where is that expert?" Chi said even more awkwardly, "I don't know where that expert is. I only know that in 10 days, that expert will come to the Long River Galaxy again. At that time, I'm afraid." Zhuan said indifferently, "Then I'll wait here for 10 days. Chi was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed. During these 10 days, Zhuan basically lived in the most luxurious mansion arranged by Chi. Many cultivators in the Long River Galaxy's main city knew that Chi had invited a Void Sky expert to oversee the situation. The fear of the Void Sky expert wanting them to move away had subsided a lot. After all, their Long River Galaxy also had a Void Sky expert overseeing it. Naturally, they didn't fear the void sky expert who had threatened their galaxy. During these 10 days, Chi-Chi cleverly didn't disturb Zhuan. On the 10th day, Chi-Chi arrived outside Zhuan's mansion and bowed respectfully. Brother Zhuan, it's been 10 days. After Chi-Chi finished speaking, the mansion's door opened by itself. A white-clothed youth slowly walked out. However, the white-clothed youth didn't look at Chi-Chi. Instead, he looked at the starry sky outside the main city and said with a slight smile, "The void sky expert you mentioned is already here. Moreover, he's an expert at the peak of the 8th step void sky stage." What? An expert at the peak of the 8th step void sky stage? How is that possible? Chi-Chi's body trembled as he shouted in disbelief. The Long River Galaxy didn't even have a void sky expert, and an expert at the peak of the 8th step void sky stage was already a peak expert in the heaven domain. Chi-Chi didn't even have the qualifications to meet such an expert. After all, Chi-Chi was simply an ant in front of such an expert. Zhuan didn't answer Chi-Chi. Instead, he stepped into the void and quietly floated above the Long River Galaxy, bearing the gaze of countless cultivators in the galaxy. This caused a lot of uproar. All the cultivators in the galaxy knew that the white-clothed youth floating alone above the galaxy should be the void sky expert that Chi-Chi had invited. At this moment, Zhuan's gaze was calm, but his heart wasn't as calm. He naturally didn't care about an expert at the peak of the 8th step void sky stage. What he found strange was that an expert at the peak of the 8th step void sky stage actually wanted to snatch an extremely remote galaxy like the Long River Galaxy. It was really too strange. Thinking of this, Zhuan increasingly felt that there was something hidden in the Long River Galaxy. However, he couldn't detect it with his divine sense. Soon, a violent sound of something breaking through the void came from the depths of the starry sky like a meteor streaking across the starry sky. Soon, this stream of light stopped not far from the Long River Galaxy. Chi-Chi, this old man gave you and the Long River Galaxy a chance to survive, but you didn't grasp it well. Don't blame me for being impolite. The stream of light gradually converged, revealing the figure inside. This was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s. He had blue hair, azure eyes, and even the clothes he was wearing were blue. Chapter 25:45. Void Sky Collision. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man released an extremely terrifying killing intent. This killing intent was like a cloud that enveloped the entire Long River Galaxy. Countless cultivators in the Long River Galaxy felt this killing intent and their hearts trembled. They all knelt on the ground. Some of the weaker cultivators even spat out mouthfuls of blood. Their faces turned pale and their bodies twitched. What a terrifying killing intent. What kind of expert is he? It's over. Our Long River Galaxy actually provoked such a terrifying void sky expert. He's at the peak of the void sky 8th step. In the Huaxia heavenly region, he's already a supreme expert. What should we do? This kind of expert can destroy our Long River Galaxy with a wave of his hand. Didn't our Long River Galaxy's Chi-Chi invite a void sky expert? Perhaps he can stop him. You're thinking too much. This young man's aura isn't obvious. Perhaps he really is a void sky expert, but I'm afraid he won't be able to stop a peak void sky expert. Countless cultivators in the Long River Galaxy were in an uproar. They discussed spiritedly, but their eyes were filled with despair and fear. Chi-Chi's body trembled and a wave of regret rose in his heart. He knew he shouldn't have placed all his hopes on Zhuan. He knew that Zhuan was definitely a void sky expert, but it was impossible for him to reach the peak of the void sky 8th step in such a short time. Facing this blue-haired, blue-eyed peak void sky expert, Chi-Chi knew that Zhuan would lose without a doubt. Moreover, he would lose his life. You want to destroy the Long River Galaxy? Have you asked me? Zhuan stood with his hands behind his back and looked calmly at the blue-haired, blue-eyed middle-aged man in front of him. Zhuan felt that this blue-haired, blue-eyed man wasn't an ordinary cultivator. Although his cultivation seemed to be at the peak of the void sky 8th step, Zhuan could feel that there was an even more profound and mysterious power within this man's body. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man slowly turned his head and stared at Zhuan with his blue eyes. He sneered and said, "You think you're qualified?" Many of the cultivators in the Long River system shook their heads inwardly, thinking that Jun was overestimating himself. After all, the aura of the blue-haired, blue-eyed man was simply too vast. It was like a rainbow piercing through the sun. Just by sensing it, many cultivators felt their hearts tremble. On the other hand, the aura of the white-robed young man was much inferior. It was even somewhat ordinary. All the cultivators in the Long River galaxy shook their heads and sighed. They knew that the Void Sky expert invited by Chi-Chi was doomed. They knew that even though the white-haired youth was also a Void Sky expert, in their opinion, he was at most a Void Sky expert at the first or second step. There was a huge gap between him and a peak Void Sky expert at the 8th step. All the cultivators in Long River system wanted to retreat. They wanted to take out their flying divine artifacts and leave Long River system as far away as possible. However, these cultivators quickly discovered that their actions were completely futile. This was because the terrifying killing intent radiating from the blue-haired, blue-eyed man had firmly locked onto them, making it difficult for them to circulate their divine power, let alone use their flying artifacts to leave this place. Sigh. We're done for. Chi-Chi's heart sank, especially when he felt the terrifying killing intent. The only hope in his heart had completely dissipated. He knew that the entire Long River system would not be able to escape this calamity. As for Jun, he was afraid that he would also die here. Jun looked indifferently at the blue-haired, blue-eyed man with a contemplative expression. He didn't care about the cultivation of the blue-haired, blue-eyed man. However, there was an obscure aura on the blue-haired, blue-eyed man that Un was somewhat familiar with. As for what it was, Un couldn't remember. What? Are you afraid? If you're afraid, then immediately kneel in front of me and kowtow 100 times to apologize. Then, scram as far away as you can. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man looked at Zhuo arrogantly. However, Nun shook his head and said, "If you apologize now, I'll spare your life. Otherwise, you won't have any chance at all." As soon as Zhuo said this, all the cultivators in Long River system revealed bitter smiles. Chi-Chi shook his head and sighed. This Zhuo is still too young. He's still so arrogant in the face of such an expert. Could it be that he thinks the Grand Pure One is his backing? Chi-Chi knew that Jun was the Grand Pure One's disciple. However, after Chi-Chi found out that Jun had left the Huaxia Heaven Realm, he no longer had anything to do with the Grand Pure One. He knew that the Grand Pure One wouldn't stand up for Jun, so he was quite puzzled that Jun was still so arrogant. Could it be that this Jun had some backing? However, Chi-Chi soon smiled bitterly. He knew that he was overthinking. No matter how strong this Jun was, it was impossible for him to reach the peak of the 8th step Void Heaven Realm in such a short time. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man was stunned at first. Then, he looked at Zhuo as if he was looking at an idiot and said, "You want me to apologize? Do you know who you're talking to? Who do you think you are? You don't have the right to let me know who you are?" Zhuo said indifferently, but this caused another uproar. Many cultivators in Long River system felt that Hun was too arrogant. Good. You're really arrogant and conceited enough. Watch how I teach you a lesson today. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man was so angry that he laughed. He quickly formed a seal with his hands. Immediately, waves of blue energy rushed out and formed a blue mist. The blue mist kept rolling and then turned into an angry dragon. It suddenly rushed out and rushed toward Zhuo. When Zhuo's divine sense fell on the blue mist, his eyes narrowed slightly. This blue mist was not real mist. It was actually made up of countless small blue insects. Because these small insects were very small, it was difficult to see them clearly with the naked eye. If these small insects gathered together in groups, it was really easy to see the blue mist from a distance. Goo insects. The moment Zhuo saw the little bug that formed the blue mist, he thought of the blood parasite chain he had seen in the true dragon blood pool. The goo insects in the blue mist had the same attack method as the blood goo. However, the power of the small blue insects was far inferior to the blood goo he saw in the past. In just an instant, Zhuo's figure was completely wrapped in the blue mist. It was difficult to see him. A long sigh came from the Long River system. Many cultivators knew that the Void Sky powerhouse invited by Chi-Chi had been killed in one move. Chi-Chi smiled bitterly. His heart was full of regret. Why did he ask Juan to block this terrifying powerhouse? In the end, everyone in the Long River system was going to die. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man sneered and said disdainfully, "Overconfident ant. I thought you were very powerful. You can't even take the most ordinary attack." Boom! Before the blue-haired, blue-eyed man finished speaking, the blue mist in front of him exploded. Immediately, a white-clothed young man slowly stepped out with a gray divine sword in his hand. Chapter 2546. Complete Suppression, Is That All You've Got? Jun held the king's sword and looked at the blue-haired, blue-eyed man indifferently. His eyes finally showed a trace of interest. He finally knew why the blue-haired, blue-eyed man had a familiar aura. It turned out to be the power of a venomous insect. Originally, Juan knew nothing about venomous insects, but he inherited the memories of Miao Bang. Miao Bang was an expert of the sorcerer tribe, and his blood-venomous insect divine ability was famous in the sorcerer tribe. His knowledge and use of venomous insects far surpassed ordinary sorcerer tribe members. Therefore, the moment the blue-haired, blue-eyed man attacked, Yun had already guessed that he was using the power of a venomous insect. However, what Juan didn't understand was why, other than the Miao Bang, there were other people in the 8 heavens who could use the mysterious power of venomous insects. One had to know that only the sorcerer tribe knew and used the secret of venomous insects. It was very difficult for a human to use the sorcerer tribe's cultivation method. After all, the human race and the sorcerer tribe were two different races with different internal structures. Naturally, their cultivation methods were also very different. However, the blue-haired, blue-eyed man in front of him was clearly a human, but he actually used the power of a venomous insect. This made Zhuowen very puzzled. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man's gaze finally became serious. He suppressed the shock in his eyes and looked at Zhuowen with fear. "Not bad. You actually blocked my attack." Many cultivators in the Long River Galaxy also looked surprised, but their surprise soon turned into ecstasy. No one expected that the white-clothed young man, who they didn't think very highly of, could easily block the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's attack. Didn't that mean that the white-clothed young man was also an expert at the peak of the Void Sky 8th step? It seems that I was wrong. Brother Zhua is also an expert at the peak of the Void Sky 8th step. But how is this possible? When he left China, he was only a heavenly god. In just a few hundred years after returning to China, his cultivation has already reached the peak of the Void Sky 8th step? How did he cultivate so quickly? Chi-Chi heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Soon after, intense shock filled his face. He knew a little about Zhuowen. Therefore, he found it even more unbelievable than others. After all, a few hundred years ago, Zhuowen was only at the heavenly god realm when he was brought to their Long River Galaxy by the Pure Sky sect. In the blink of an eye, a few hundred years had passed, yet this kid was already able to resist an expert at the peak of the 8th Ascension Void stage like the blue-haired, blue-eyed man. Wasn't this abnormal? Brother Zhua is truly a dragon amongst men. I'm afraid that only Lian Meng of the Huaxia Sky region, who possesses the innate immortal body, can match up to his cultivation speed. The disciples of the domain lord of Taiching are truly abnormal. Chi-Chi took a deep breath and looked at the young man in white with a complicated expression as he sighed with emotion. "Why don't you use your strongest move? Otherwise, you won't have a chance." Zhuowen hovered in the air and looked at Chi-Chi indifferently. A trace of anger appeared in the blue-haired man's eyes when he saw Zhuo Wen's arrogance. He said, "You think too highly of yourself. Do you think you're invincible just because you've received a single attack from me?" Zhuowen looked at the blue-haired, blue-eyed man silently and did not reply. With his strength, it would be easy for him to kill the blue-haired, blue-eyed man. However, when he saw the blue-haired, blue-eyed man use the power of goo worms, Zhuowen did not plan to be in a hurry to attack. Instead, he wanted to see what other attacks the blue-haired, blue-eyed man had. After all, this was the first time in the 8 heavens that he had seen a human using the power of goo worms of the shaman clan. He naturally wanted to see it for himself. The blue-haired blue-eyed man's eyes burned with anger when he saw Zhuowen's calm appearance. He roared angrily, and the sound of bones breaking rang out from his body. Then, the sound of bones breaking rang out continuously. Blue mist burst out from the blue-haired blue-eyed man's body, and the blue-haired blue-eyed man involuntarily let out a low scream. The enormous blue fog began to adhere to the surface of the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's body. Subsequently, the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's clothes began to tear apart inch by inch. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man continued to grow taller within the blue fog. In just an instant, the blue-haired blue-eyed man turned into a 10,000-foot-tall giant. However, the skin of the blue-haired blue-eyed man was dark blue, and his upper body was naked. If one looked carefully, they would see that the skin of the giant was densely packed with small blue insects. The blue-haired blue-eyed man's aura increased by 1,000 times. He had already broken through the peak of the 8 steps Void Sky realm and entered the half-step 9 steps Void Sky realm. When this aura burst out, countless cultivators in the Long River system turned pale. Even Chi-Chi was no exception. They all looked at Zhuan with unconcealable worry in their eyes. After the blue-haired blue-eyed man used the power of the goo insects to transform into a 10,000-foot-tall giant, he roared angrily. The sound waves spread out in all directions. Then, the blue-haired blue-eyed man took a step forward. Rumble! With just one step, an ear-piercing explosion rang out in the starry sky. It was as if countless lightning bolts were wreaking havoc in the starry sky. The blue-haired blue-eyed man appeared in front of Zhuan like a blue phantom. The blue-haired blue-eyed man looked down at Zhuan, who was as small as an ant in front of him. His eyes were filled with indifference. Then he stretched out his right hand, clenched it into a fist, and slammed it down at Zhuan. How terrifying! This attack should be enough to wipe out the entire Long River galaxy. This is the power of a half-step 9 steps Void Sky realm expert. Chi-Chi's body trembled. His face was pale and his voice was trembling. How can a candlelight compete with the sun and moon? The blue-haired blue-eyed man laughed heartily. He looked at Zhuan as if he was looking at a dead man. Zhuan hovered in the starry sky, quietly looking at the huge blue arm that was getting closer and closer. The corners of his mouth revealed a trace of mockery. Zhuan slowly raised the king's sword and gently slashed out. It was like an old man dancing by a lake. However, the moment the king's sword touched the huge arm, endless astral winds erupted. Then the entire starry sky erupted with terrifying space-time distortions. Then, the huge arm of the blue-haired blue-eyed man shattered into pieces. Ah! The blue-haired blue-eyed man screamed and quickly retreated. He looked ahead in horror, but he didn't see any trace of Zhuan. "Are you looking for me?" An indifferent voice sounded behind the blue-haired blue-eyed man. Before the blue-haired blue-eyed man could turn around, he felt a pain in his waist. Then, he felt his flesh and blood being crushed and annihilated by a terrifying energy. No, what is this power? Chapter 2547. Servant Pucci. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked at the white-robed youth with disbelief. He had used his final trump card. His strength was comparable to a half-step Void Sky 9th step expert, but it was defeated by the youth in front of him in just a few moves. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man faintly felt that if the white-robed youth wanted to kill him, that sword strike just now would have been enough to kill him. However, the white-robed youth did not do so. The Long River Galaxy, on the other hand, fell into a long period of silence. But soon, an uproar broke out. All the cultivators looked at the white-robed youth hovering above the galaxy, their eyes filled with passion. A shocking talent. He must have already reached the Void Sky 9th step. In the entire Long River Galaxy, the person with the most complicated feelings was Chi-Chi. He knew Zhuowen very well. The weak heavenly deity in the past had already become a peak expert in the heaven domain. If someone said this in front of him in the past, he would definitely slap them and scold them for talking nonsense. But now, this kind of thing happened in front of his eyes. He knew that this was all real, so he couldn't help but sigh. This Zhuowen was a world-shocking genius. He was even more heaven-defying than Lian Meng, who had an innate immortal body in the Grand Clarity Immortal Realm. You're actually a ninth step expert? How is this possible? I've seen all the ninth step experts in the Huaxia Heaven domain. Why haven't I seen you before? For you. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man looked at Zhuan with fear. He was currently heavily injured and was locked onto by Zhuan's killing intent. He knew that he could not act rashly. Otherwise, he would face Zhuan's merciless killing intent. Zhuan did not answer the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's question. Instead, he asked, "You're only a human. Why do you have the power of the witch race's venomous insects? Answer me." As soon as Zhuan said this, the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's pupils shrank. He looked at the white-robed youth in front of him in disbelief. Goo worms had always been his secret. It was by relying on the power of goo worms that he was able to reach the peak of 8th step in just a few thousand years despite his mediocre talent. Moreover, because of his terrifying goo worms, his strength was comparable to a half-step Void Sky 9th stage expert. He also had an extremely high status in the Huaxia Heaven domain. Apart from the core super forces of the Heaven domain, not many forces in the Heaven domain dared to provoke him. How do you know about goo worms? And what is the witch tribe? The blue-haired, blue-eyed man asked with a frown. Zhuan's eyes flashed. It seemed that the blue-haired man did not know that the goo worms came from the shaman tribe. However, this guy was clearly a human, so where did the goo worms in his body come from? Also, he learned from Miao Bang's memories that the cultivation method of goo worms was extremely harsh. If one did not have a terrifying physical body, planting goo worms in one's body would only result in a backlash and one would become a puppet. It should be known that the sorcerer tribe was a large tribe in the untainted heavenly realm. They were ranked first among the countless tribes, and they were blessed with a powerful physical body. The sorcerer tribe's physical body was inherited from the ancestor of the sorcerer tribe, and they had a trace of the ancestor's bloodline. Their physical bodies were extremely terrifying, even more so than the devouring clans. It was said that the physical body of an ordinary sorcerer tribe member was comparable to the devouring king, who had awakened the royal bloodline. Even if the devouring clan's physical body was extremely powerful, planting goo worms in their bodies was not 100% safe. If one was not careful, the goo worms could backfire and turn one into a puppet. As for the human tribe, their physical bodies were naturally weak. Not to mention the sorcerer tribe, they were even inferior to the devouring clan. They were not suitable for the cultivation method of the sorcerer tribe's goo worms. However, the blue-haired, blue-eyed man in front of him was clearly a human, but he was actually using the sorcerer tribe's goo worms to cultivate. Moreover, he had cultivated to the peak of the Void Sky 8th stage. This made Zhuan interested in this person. Thinking of this, Zhuan took a step forward and pointed his sword finger at the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's forehead. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man was already severely injured, so how could he be Zhuan's opponent? He could only watch as Zhuan left a trace of an imprint in the depths of his soul. Slave imprint. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man glared at Zhuan. If it weren't for the fact that you still have some value, you wouldn't even be worth being my slave. Zhuan's tone was calm, but his eyes were filled with terrifying killing intent. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man trembled, but he didn't dare to provoke Zhuan. He knew that the gap between him and the white-clothed young man in front of him was too big. After planting the slave imprint in the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's soul, Zhuan no longer paid attention to him. Instead, he leisurely landed in the main city of the Long River Galaxy. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man looked at Zhuan's back with a trace of struggle in his eyes. In the end, he let out a long sigh and could only resign himself to his fate and follow behind Zhuan. Brother Zhua, I didn't expect you to be so strong. If it weren't for your help, the Long River Galaxy would have suffered a catastrophe. Chi hurried to welcome him, his eyes full of respect. Brother Chi, arrange a private room for me, Zhuan said indifferently. Chi glanced at the blue-haired, blue-eyed man behind Zhuan, thought of something, and quickly opened a luxurious private room for Zhuan respectfully. After entering the private room, Zhuan slowly sat down on the seat, played with the teacup on the table, and said indifferently, "The Long River Galaxy is only the outermost galaxy of the Huaxia Heaven realm. You are a master at the peak of the 8 steps void realm, so why do you want to rob the Long River Galaxy? The blue-haired, blue-eyed man's face turned ugly, and he said coldly, I'm just doing it for fun. I don't mean anything else. Unfortunately, before the blue-haired, blue-eyed man could say anything, he clutched his hair and fell to the ground, struggling and twitching as if he was suffering from severe pain. I've planted a slave imprint in your soul. If I want to, I can completely destroy your soul and strip you of your illusory bridge, causing you to die completely. Once you're dead, I can forcefully search your soul and obtain all your memories, Zhuowen said indifferently. I'll talk. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man hurriedly begged for mercy. He knew that the white-clothed young man in front of him was a ruthless person. Now that his life was in the hands of this person, he didn't dare to be unyielding. Zhuowen nodded, and only then did the blue-haired, blue-eyed man feel the pain in his soul disappear. He stood up and looked at the white-clothed young man in front of him with fear in his eyes. Speak, Zhuowen said indifferently. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man hesitated for a moment before revealing the purpose of coming to the Long River Galaxy. He didn't dare to hide anything. He knew that once the white-clothed young man in front of him noticed something was wrong, he would immediately search his soul. At that time, it would be too late for him to cry. Chapter 2548. Clues about the Zhurong Gu. You are saying that there is a very powerful Gu fragment hidden in the Long River system? Zhuowen asked with a frown. After listening to the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's explanation, Zhuowen also knew that this man had come for a powerful Gu fragment. From the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's fervent eyes, Zhuowen could see that he was determined to obtain this Gu fragment. How do you know that there is a Gu fragment in the Long River system? And you, a mere human, how did you manage to cultivate Gu worms? Zhuowen looked at the blue-haired, blue-eyed man and his gaze became serious. From Miao Bang's memories, he also understood the sorcerer tribe's method of cultivating Gu worms. He had deduced that the sorcerer tribe's Gu worm cultivation method was not suitable for the human tribe. Even though Zhuowen's doppelganger had the bloodline of the Devourer King, it was not suitable for him. Plus, it was easy for him to be devoured by the Gu. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man sighed softly. After hesitating for a moment, he finally answered, Actually, I don't know about the shaman tribe and the cultivation method of the Gu worms that you mentioned. Furthermore, the Gu worms that I control are not particularly strong. They are all controlled by the fragments of the Gu worms that I obtained and formed powerful attacks. As he spoke, the blue-haired, blue-eyed man took out a fiery red crystal that was the size of a fingernail from his spirit ring. This fiery red crystal looked crystal clear. It was as dazzling as a red gem. The moment the blue-haired, blue-eyed man took out the red gem, a blue mist burst out from his body. It surrounded the red crystal as if it was worshipping the red crystal. Zhuowen looked at the red crystal in silence. Although the red crystal was not complete, he could still tell that it was a part of a Gu's body. In particular, the red crystal looked ordinary, but the energy it contained shocked even Zhuowen. Zhuowen revealed a look of pleasant surprise. The moment the blue-haired, blue-eyed man took out the red crystal, Zhuowen felt that the crystal was very familiar. Now that he had carefully observed it, an inconceivable thought appeared in his mind. A fragment of the Zhurong Gu? Zhuowen thought to himself. He had inherited Miao Bang's memories and knew what the Zhurong Gu looked like and even its aura. Back then, Yun had learned from Miao Bang's memories that the Zhurong Gu was scattered in the Wuji Taishu of the Huaxia Heaven region. However, he had already encountered a fragment of the Zhurong Gu before he even entered the boundless Taishu. It seemed like he was really lucky this time. The Zhurong Gu was extremely powerful. Even if one didn't use it for cultivation, it was still extremely terrifying as a means of attack. Even ordinary Dao validation experts would pale in fear. After knowing the memories of Miao Bang, Yun was determined to obtain the Zhurong Gu. His gaze also revealed a trace of passion. You mean the other part of the fragment is in the Long River Galaxy? Zhuowen asked calmly. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man sighed softly and nodded. Yes, I've had this fragment for a long time and have learned some things about it. Therefore, I found the Long River Galaxy by relying on the reaction of this crystal. There must be something in the Long River Galaxy that is related to this fragment. That's why I want to occupy the Long River Galaxy and then look for something that can cause this fragment to react. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man also saw the heated expression in Zhuo Wen's eyes when he spoke until this point. The sigh in his heart became even denser. Immediately, he handed the red crystal in his hand to Zhuo Wen and said, "Sir, please treat this as my apology for offending you." Although the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's eyes were full of pain, he knew that his spirit had been planted with a slave seal by the white-clothed young man in front of him. If this person asked him to hand over this thing, he would not be able to resist. Since he was going to lose it anyway, he might as well take the initiative to hand it over. This way, he could gain back the favor of the white-clothed young man in front of him. Sure enough, after the blue-haired, blue-eyed man took the initiative to hand over the part of the Zhuanggu, Zhuan nodded with satisfaction and the former sighed softly in his heart. Zhuan played with the red crystal in his hand, then with a wave of his sleeve, took out the slave seal from the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's spirit. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply to Zhuan. "Thank you, sir. This one is Lan Ji, the protector of Lan Qi Hall in the Taiqing Immortal Realm. May I know sir's name?" "Longwen, just a rogue cultivator," Zhuowen said indifferently. When he left the Taiqing Immortal Realm, he caused a lot of trouble there. Zhuowen knew that if he revealed his real name, there would be a lot of trouble, so he simply used a fake name. "Sir Long." Lan Ji cupped his fists again and said cautiously, "By the way, do you know what happened in Boundless Taishu?" Zhuowen lowered his eyelids and asked indifferently. Chi had already mentioned to him that the North Dock Hall Master, perfected North Dock, had died in Boundless Taishu a few months ago. It was said that the entire Boundless Taishu was completely sealed. As for the reason, Yuan naturally didn't know. Since Lan Ji was an expert of the Taiqing Immortal Realm, he should have some understanding of what happened in Boundless Taishu. Lan Ji's eyes flickered and he said with a complicated expression, "If I'm not wrong, most of these goo worms are in Boundless Taishu. These goo worms are very mysterious and powerful, and they killed perfected North Dock. Of course, other than the upper echelons of the Heaven Domain, the other cultivators don't know about this at all. I only guessed it because I have a small part of the goo worms." Zhuowen frowned and said coldly, "Taiqing is also involved." Lan Ji's heart jumped. Taiqing was the ruler of the Heaven Domain in Huaxia and was respected by countless forces in the Heaven Domain. Even he didn't dare to call him Taiqing directly. Instead, he would respectfully call him Supremacy Taiqing. However, this young man in white not only called him Taiqing directly, but also spoke in a matter-of-fact tone. This made Lan Ji feel very disapproving of this young man in white. He felt that this young man in white was puffing himself up at his own cost. Even if this young man in white was powerful, he only thought that he was at most in the Life Enlightenment realm. Lan Ji was also a Life Enlightenment realm expert. Even when their palace master mentioned Taiqing, he would respectfully address him as Taiqing Honorable and would not dare to casually use his name. However, this white-clothed youth before them was clearly too arrogant. However, Lan Ji didn't dare to say this out loud. Otherwise, if this young man in white was displeased and planted a slave imprint on him again, it would be too late for him to cry. Supremacy Taiqing, Supremacy Yuqing, and Supremacy Shangqing have been in seclusion for hundreds of years and have yet to come out, Lan Ji said in a deep voice. Zhuowen nodded. It seemed that Taiqing and the others weren't involved. In that case, Zhuowen was quite relieved. Taiqing's strength was unfathomable and was comparable to Sakyamuni. Chapter 2549. Planning Capture. Can't other lone cultivators go in? Zhuowen asked. I'm afraid it's very difficult, unless you have a large faction backing you. If you want to go in, you only need to join Lan Ran Hall. The hall master will definitely give you a spot. Lan Ji said. A cold smile appeared on Zhuowen's face. Lan Ji was so scared that he didn't dare to speak again. He just lowered his head. There's nothing for you to do now, Scram. Zhuowen waved his hand. Lan Ji cupped his fists and let out a sigh of relief in his heart before flying away. Long Wen, I will remember you. You provoked my Lan Ranhal, I won't let you go so easily. After leaving Long River Galaxy, Lan Ji looked at the Long River Galaxy behind him with hatred and malevolence. This time he suffered a double loss, he was filled with regret. After returning, Lan Ji planned to tell Lan Ranhal's Hall Master, Lan Zun, everything about the goo worm. He knew that as long as he told Lan Zun would definitely take action. Of course, Lan Ji also knew that this Jun was not simple. Lan Zun alone might not be his match. When the time comes, he would inform the other Hall Masters to kill this child together. Inside the room, Blackie and the Blood Immortal appeared not far away. Blackie sat on the hilt of his sword. He looked at Zhuowen with a complicated gaze and said, "Kid, are you going to let this person go just like that? He doesn't look like someone who will give up easily." Zhuowen waved his hand and said, "I let him leave on purpose. This time, I'm returning to the heavenly region of Huaxia not only to go to the boundless Taishu to take the great void bone-refining ginseng, the 8 trigrams divining water, and the great simplicity double dragon Lingji, but also to establish my authority in the heavenly region of Huaxia." Xiao He nodded, looking at the white-clothed youth in front of her with some amazement. Since becoming an artifact cultivator, Xiao He's potential was limitless. Coupled with the fact that she never lacked resources, her cultivation speed was extremely fast and she broke through to life comprehension realm. Now, Xiao He was strong enough to break away from the Thunderfire sword, reconstruct her body, and become her master. But Xiao He knew that even if he broke through to the life comprehension realm, he was still far from being a match for the white-clothed youth before him. Looking at the handsome young man in white, Xiao He was reminded of the young master of the Zhuo family in Rattan Armor City. He had never thought that the young master could grow to such a level. It could be said that Zhuo now stood at the peak of the 8 heavens. Besides the mysterious Desolation Heavenly Domain and Xianmi Heavenly Domain, there was nothing in the 8 heavens that could threaten this white-clothed young man. The Zhurong-gu in Miaobang's memory is in this Long River Galaxy. Xiao He, Blood Immortal, you too come with me to explore it. After saying that, Yuan took out the red crystal. Then, he found that the red crystal let out a hissing sound and broke through the sky. The moment Yuan took the red crystal, he felt that the power in the crystal was restless. Obviously, Lan Ji didn't lie to him. Even if there was no other part of the Zhurong-gu in the Long River Galaxy, it was probably related to the Zhurong-gu. The Zhurong-gu is too broken. According to Miaobang's memory, the Zhurong-gu should be the size of a palm. Now, it's only the size of a fingernail. Obviously, it's only a small part of the Zhurong-gu. Zhuan muttered to himself. Then, he quietly chased after the red crystal and left the room. With Yuan's cultivation, it was too easy for him to leave silently. After all, there wasn't even a void sky cultivator in the Long River Galaxy. This was an extremely remote planet. Most of the planet was barren and desert. There weren't many signs of life. The moment the red crystal entered the planet, it drilled into the planet's interior. Like a drill, it kept drilling into the planet's underground. Zhuan slowly followed behind it. The Thunderfire sword and the Blood Immortal sword were like meat grinders, opening a path in front. They weren't shaken off by the red crystal. After about an hour, Yuan landed in a space filled with magma. He knew that he should have entered the depths of the planet's core. Zhuowen's eyes slightly focused. He looked at the depths of the magma and saw that in the center of the magma, there was a huge worm. This worm was made of magma. Upon closer inspection, it was a worm made of magma. As soon as the red crystal entered the depths of the planet's core, it let out an excited hissing sound and rushed towards the magma worm. Unfortunately, Yuan wouldn't let the red crystal succeed. The giant hand made of divine power grabbed the red crystal. No matter how hard the red crystal struggled, it was useless. The moment the magma worm realized that Yuan had grabbed the red crystal, it immediately let out an angry roar. Waves of magma rushed towards Yuan. The Thunderfire sword and the Blood Immortal sword turned into 2 streams of light and blocked in front of Yuan. However, he soon found that both the Thunderfire sword and the Blood Immortal sword were blown away. Upon closer inspection, the tough bodies of the Thunderfire sword and the Blood Immortal sword were showing signs of melting. This is not ordinary magma. The temperature is too high. It almost melted the Thunderfire sword and the Blood Immortal sword. Xiao Hei's frightened voice came. Zhuan quickly put away the Thunderfire sword and the Blood Immortal sword. Then, he took out the King's sword and slashed out. Instantly, the terrifying Death Chi turned into a towering Death Sword Chi and blasted on the magma. However, he soon found that the magma had fused the Death Sword Chi into a gaseous substance. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. How could the magma be so terrifying? The temperature was definitely not ordinary magma. Is it because of the Zhurong-gu? Zhuowen's eyes flickered. In Miaobang's memory, the Zhurong-gu was the gu in the body of Zhurong, one of the 12 ancestors of sorcery in the untainted heavenly realm. It possessed the most powerful flame energy in the starry sky. Zhurong was known as the fire ancestor in the untainted heavenly realm. The flame that Zhurong controlled could burn and destroy everything in the world. Although Zhuon thought that it was a bit exaggerated, he also knew that such a reputation represented how terrifying and powerful Zhurong's flame energy was. The Zhurong-gu was the source of Zhurong's energy. Although only a part of the Zhurong-gu was hidden in the magma, Zhuon also knew that the magma in the core of the earth had been subtly transformed into a terrifying energy by the Zhurong-gu. Zhuon even felt an aura similar to the way of heaven in the magma. Let's go. This is its space. We will be at a disadvantage if we fight here. Chapter 2550. Fighting the Zhurong-gu. Zhuowen's sword chi was extremely powerful, but unfortunately, in front of the magma gu, it was like scratching an itch, not worth mentioning at all. When Zhuon quickly rushed towards the surface, the magma behind him turned into a terrifying giant hand and grabbed at Zhuon. Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy, but he didn't dare to be careless. He immediately summoned the phagocytosis and used it to block behind him, barely blocking the giant magma hand. With the help of Bloodscale, he had already unlocked more than 8,000 of the 9,999 restrictions in the phagocytosis. Now, the phagocytosis's power was not what it used to be. Moreover, he had a lot of Dao fruits on him. After unlocking more than 8,000 restrictions, he refined 3 Dao fruits into the phagocytosis, causing the Dao aura inside the phagocytosis to become even more intense and terrifying. Although the phagocytosis's power was not what it used to be, the moment it blocked the giant magma hand, Zhuowen's heart still trembled. This was because even the phagocytosis was shaking violently, as if it would collapse at any time. Fortunately, the phagocytosis was not an ordinary treasure. Although it was shaking violently, it still protected Zhuon and smoothly left the surface. Zhuon jumped up and immediately jumped out of the planet, floating in the starry sky hundreds of millions of miles away. He looked down at the seemingly ordinary planet below with a dignified expression. Zhuon was sure that the magma inside the planet's core contained fragments of the Zhurong-gu. However, he found it strange that the Zhurong-gu fragment that Lan Ji gave him was also a fragment of the Zhurong-gu. Why was the Zhurong-gu fragment that Lan Ji gave him not so powerful, but the Zhurong-gu fragment inside the planet's core was so terrifying? It should be because of the magma in the planet's core. Zhuowen's eyes flashed with a trace of understanding. Since the Zhurong-gu fragment had turned into fragments, it must have experienced a world-shaking battle and finally been shattered by some almighty expert. Zhurong should have fallen along with it. A broken Zhurong-gu fragment naturally didn't have much energy, but once it could be nourished with magma or flame energy, the Zhurong-gu fragment's power would naturally slowly recover and become stronger. This was also why the Zhurong-gu fragment in Zhuowen's hand was not so powerful, but the Zhurong-gu fragment inside the planet's Zhurong-gu fragment was so terrifying. Rumble! Rumble! While Zhuon was floating in the starry sky, the planet below him suddenly trembled, and then burst. A moment, a vast amount of fiery red magma surging out like a giant wave in the sea, it was extremely terrifying. The area affected by the magma was simply too large. The nearby planets with life were all enveloped by it, and they were instantly annihilated into nothingness. Zhuon Zhurong-gu fragment and Zhurong-gu fragment Zhurong-gu. Even if it was just a fragment, It still possessed such terrifying energy. Especially after the Zhurong-gu fragment soaked the magma energy, it was no longer ordinary magma energy. Even Zhurong-gu felt that it was extremely difficult to deal with. I have to draw the Zhurong-gu fragment away. Otherwise, the Long River Galaxy may be destroyed by the aftermath of the battle. Yun Zhurong-gu's eyes were solemn, and he immediately flew out of the Long River Galaxy. The endless magma turned into a river that crossed the entire galaxy, following closely behind Zhurong-gu. It also erupted with a deafening roar, attracting the attention of all the cultivators in the galaxy. Chi-Chi walked out of the main city and looked at the huge river of magma and the white-clothed young man in front of it. He smiled bitterly and said, Brother Zhua really knows how to cause trouble." When Zhurong-gu landed in the starry sky far away from the Long River Galaxy and stopped, looking at the river of magma that was chasing after him with a solemn gaze. When the river of magma saw Zhurong-gu stop, it immediately set off a terrifying wave of magma and swept toward Zhurong-gu. Waning son of the sea. Zhurong-gu pointed at the starry sky, and suddenly, waves of purple energy spread out. Then, the space under Zhurong-gu's feet turned into an endless purple ocean. At the end of the purple ocean, a mysterious purple sun slowly rose. At this moment, the space-time of the purple ocean formed a strange boundary, completely isolating it from the space-time outside the purple ocean. The moment the river of magma swept into the purple ocean, it was affected by the space-time imprisonment power of the purple ocean, and its speed slowed down infinitely. Waves of purple water surged, drowning the river of magma. Unfortunately, the purple waves were quickly annihilated by the river of magma. Then, the river of magma began to wreak havoc in the purple ocean boundary. Yin Zhurong-gu stood under the purple sun and looked at the purple ocean boundary around him, trembling violently. His eyes narrowed. He still underestimated the power of the Zhurong-gu fragment. It was the first time he saw his space-time ability produce such a violent abnormality, as if it would be broken at any time. Break for me. Yun Zhurong-gu snorted coldly and pointed his finger downwards. Suddenly, the purple sun fell rapidly and slammed heavily on the river of magma. The purple sun and the fiery red magma immediately entangled together. Then, Yun Zhurong-gu was surprised to find that the terrifying purple sun was blocked by the river of magma. The river of magma let out a terrifying roar, and then Yun Zhurong-gu found that the purple sun had collapsed. Then, the vast purple ocean boundary around him collapsed into countless purple powder. Yun Zhurong-gu could not help but retreat thousands of steps, looking at the river of magma with a gloomy gaze. Since Yun Zhurong-gu had reached the life enlightenment state, this was the first time his space-time ability had been broken. It was obvious that the power of the Zhurong-gu fragment was beyond Zhurong-gu's imagination. It seems that I can only use that move. I really didn't expect that a mere Zhurong-gu fragment would force me to use this move. Yun Zhurong-gu's gaze was gloomy. Then he took a deep breath and stepped forward instead of retreating. He bent his right hand and pointed at the sky above. In an instant, the surrounding space began to distort. Waves of heavenly energy that surpassed the energy of the universe poured out from the deepest part of the universe and condensed above Yun Zhurong-gu's right hand. An invisible human finger that was hundreds of feet long was constantly condensing and forming. The surface of this human finger exuded a strong heavenly energy and Taoist rhyme. Slaughtering Tao Finger! Yun Zhurong-gu shouted in his heart and used the first move of the Slaughtering Tao Finger. The Slaughtering Tao Finger was very powerful. It was clearly stated that if the Slaughtering Tao Finger was perfected, it could kill the Heavenly Tao Master. Even if the Heavenly Tao Master was only at the first step of the Tao validation realm, he had crossed the threshold of the Tao validation and was above the 8 heavens. He was not so easy to kill. However, the Slaughtering Tao Finger was said to be able to kill the Heavenly Tao Master. This showed how terrifying the power of the Slaughtering Tao Finger was. Boom! Chapter 2551. Refining Bang! 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 A series of explosions resounded in the starry sky. Then, the starry sky distorted and collapsed, creating an extremely terrifying distortion zone. The magma river, which had always been successful, collapsed and turned into nothingness, revealing a fiery red crystal in the depths of the magma. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. He condensed a divine power hand and plunged it into the magma, grabbing the fiery red crystal. Puchi! The terrifying recoil directly hit Zhuowen's chest through the divine power hand, causing Zhuowen to spit out a mouthful of blood. His face turned pale and his eyes dimmed. Fortunately, although the recoil was terrifying, Zhuowen still managed to grab the fiery red crystal and immediately retreated, avoiding the terrifying distortion zone. Although the slaughtering Dao finger is powerful, it consumes too much of my energy. After retreating to a safe distance, Yuan immediately took out a divine elixir from his spiritual ring and swallowed it. His pale face became slightly rosier. Although Zhuowen's cultivation had reached the life enlightenment realm and the mysterious life divine power in his body was much stronger than ordinary life enlightenment realm cultivators, the slaughtering Dao finger was definitely not ordinary. Now, Zhuowen could only use the slaughtering Dao finger once at most, and his divine power was almost exhausted. If he wanted to use the slaughtering Dao finger twice, it would be very difficult. Of course, Zhuowen knew that as long as his cultivation improved and reached the life enlightenment realm, he should be able to use the slaughtering Dao finger several times. Zhuowen looked at the fiery red crystal in his hand and revealed a satisfied look. The fiery red crystal in his hand was about the size of 2 fingernails. It was twice as big as the red crystal given to him by Lan Ji. The moment Zhuowen took out the red crystal given to him by Lan Ji, Zhuowen discovered that the 2 crystals were emitting an extremely hot temperature and dazzling red light at the same time. Then, the 2 red crystals attracted each other and finally merged together, forming a red bead. Zhuowen looked at the red bead in his hand silently. He knew very well that the red bead was not the complete Zhurong-gu, but only a part of it. Moreover, Zhuowen, who had obtained Miao Bang's memories, knew that the Zhurong-gu was extremely difficult to tame. Even the powerful Miao Bang was not confident that he could refine the complete Zhurong-gu. However, if it was only a part of the Zhurong-gu, refining it would be much easier. In Miao Bang's memory, the gu refinement method was blood refining technique. The so-called blood refinement method was to fuse the host's blood essence into the gu worm, causing the gu worm to be imperceptibly tainted with the host's aura. In the end, the blood would dissolve in water, causing the gu worm to completely rely on the host and be completely under the host's control. However, the Zhurong-gu was not an ordinary gu. Miao Bang's memory also mentioned that if one wanted to refine the Zhurong-gu using the blood refinement method, one must persevere and proceed step by step. Otherwise, the Zhurong-gu was likely to backfire. Zhuowen's eyes flashed. He cut his finger and let a drop of blood fall on the red bead. Then, the drop of blood was greedily absorbed by the red bead. The red bead seemed to be unsatisfied. It let out a roar and immediately, a red mist burst out from the red bead, forming a huge strange beast head. It suddenly rushed toward Zhuowen as if it wanted to swallow Zhuowen whole. Zhuowen snorted coldly. He already knew that the Zhurong-gu was not so easy to tame, so he was already prepared. He immediately summoned the everlasting ice lotus, and a terrifying ice power shrouded the beast. The strange beast head formed by the blood mist immediately shrank back the moment it was shrouded by the ice power, as if it was extremely afraid of the ice power released by the everlasting ice lotus. Zhuowen's eyes lit up. The Zhurong-gu was the fire ancestor, so it naturally controlled the power of fire. The everlasting ice lotus had absorbed the origin of ice, so it was the coldest thing in the world. The everlasting ice lotus contained a powerful ice power, so it naturally had an extremely strong restraining effect on the Zhurong-gu. Zhuowen rolled up his sleeves and placed the red bead inside the everlasting ice lotus, then kept it in the spirit ring. The blood refinement method was to proceed step by step, so it could not be rushed. Otherwise, it would be easy to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. Zhuowen planned to provide a drop of blood essence to the red bead every day. After 49 days, he would take out the Zhurong-gu and see if he could refine it. During the next period, Yuan drove the space-time wheel away from the Long River Galaxy and headed toward boundless Taishu. However, Yuan could reduce the speed of the space-time wheel to the minimum and let Xiao He help him control the flight of the space-time wheel while he refined the Zhurong Gu and cultivated in the space-time wheel. After 49 days, the space-time wheel was only a few galaxies away from boundless Taishu, so Yuan stopped. He chose a remote, desolate planet and sank into the depths of the planet's core. In the endless world of lava, the everlasting ice lotus floated above Zhuowen's head, and a powerful ice power separated the surrounding lava without any hindrance. Yuan took out the red bead, his eyes flickering. After 49 days of blood refinement, Yuan could clearly feel that the Zhurong Gu had developed a sense of dependence on him. Yuan knew that now was the best time to refine the Zhurong Gu. At the thought of this, Yuan spat out a mouthful of divine fire. The endless, mysterious birth divine force provided the divine fire with a steady stream of energy. When the divine fire landed on the Zhurong Gu, the latter let out a shrill shriek that was filled with fear and anger. Yuan snorted and waved his sleeve, revealing 81 beast bone array discs. Then, he set up a huge level 9 confinement array inside the planet's core. As long as there was a level 9 confinement array, the Zhurong Gu would not be able to sense the huge commotion in the planet's core space, no matter how big the storm was. Yuan was not surprised by the strong reaction of the Zhurong Gu. After all, the Zhurong Gu belonged to one of the 12 ancestral sorcerers. It was the Gu of one of the top experts in the primeval universe. Even if he only had a portion of the fragments, it was still not to be underestimated. The Zhurong Gu let out a series of roars, and then the endless lava in the planet's core space was stirred up. It was like thousands of dragons emerging from the sea, blasting toward Yuan. Zhuowen's eyes darkened. The everlasting ice lotus guarded him tightly while he urged the divine fire to refine the Zhurong Gu. Chapter 25:52. Benefits. Of course, this did not mean that the Zhurong worm did not resist him. The everlasting ice lotus was extremely powerful. Although the magma was terrifying, it was blocked by the everlasting ice lotus. And because of the strong ice power contained in the ice lotus, the power of the Zhurong Gu worm had been weakened by a lot. As time passed, Yuan frowned. He realized that although his divine fire was getting stronger, the Zhurong worm did not show any signs of being refined. Moreover, as he refined it, the resistance of the Zhurong worm became more intense. This made Yuan a little distressed. It seems that I can only use the secret method of blood refining fusion from Miao Bang's memory. Yuan's eyes flickered. Blood refining fusion was an advanced secret method of blood refining. At the same time, it was a secret method that had no choice. If the sorcerer tribe wanted to let the Gu worm reside in their bodies and step on the path of cultivating their bodies, the first step was to tame the Gu worm. On the other hand, the sorcerer tribe usually used the blood refinement method. 49 days was enough to successfully tame any Gu worm. Of course, if there were some extremely powerful Gu worms, the short 49 days of blood refining might not be enough to tame the Gu worm. Then there was only one way, and that was blood refining fusion. Blood refining fusion was when the host fused the blood essence in his body into the Gu worm in a short period of time, causing the Gu worm's dependence on the host to increase instantly. With this increased dependence, the host could quickly tame the Gu worm. Once the Gu worm was tamed, it would naturally be a success. However, the side effects of blood refining fusion were great. If it was not successful, it would easily backfire and cause serious injuries. Moreover, the blood essence would be sucked dry by the Gu worm. It could be said that it was a risky secret method. Yuan hesitated whether to use this secret method. After all, he was not from the sorcerer tribe. After taming the Zhurong worm, he could not cultivate at all. He only wanted to use the power of the Zhurong worm. In addition, the cost of refining it was too high. Therefore, Yuan was indeed hesitant. Let's do it. This Zhurong Gu is extremely powerful. If I can absorb this Zhurong Gu, my trump card will become much stronger. Zhuowen's eyes flashed as he summoned the black-robed Yuan. He planned to use the black-robed Zhuowen's blood essence to perform the secret technique, blood fusion. The doppelganger had the bloodline of King Devourer. Therefore, its blood essence was much stronger than the original human. Therefore, using the doppelganger's blood essence to perform the secret skill, blood fusion, was naturally the most suitable choice. Moreover, if he finds that something is wrong, he can stop it in time. After all, the everlasting ice lotus is under his control. Zhuowen's original body landed not far away. He formed a seal with both hands and set up many formations in the surroundings again. These formations were all meant to counter the Zhurong worm. Once something went wrong with the Zhurong gu, Yun would activate these magic formations immediately to prevent the Zhurong gu from devouring his clones. At this moment, the doppelganger's eyes were extremely solemn. He cut a wound on his right index finger. Then, streams of blood essence flowed into the Zhurong gu through the wound. The Zhurong gu, which was originally restless, calmed down immediately after receiving the blood essence from the doppelganger. Zhuan looked at the Zhurong gu that had calmed down and heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that the secret skill, blood fusion, was really useful. However, when Zhuan saw the doppelganger's gradually pale face, his eyes darkened. It seemed that the blood fusion required a huge amount of blood essence. It had only been a while, but the doppelganger's face was already pale. I have to refine this Zhurong gu as soon as possible. Zhuan didn't dare to think too much. He spat out a mouthful of godly fire and tried his best to refine the Zhurong gu. At this moment, the Zhurong gu was extremely quiet and didn't show any signs of resistance. Obviously, the secret skill, blood fusion, did play a big role. Half an hour later, Yun finally refined the Zhurong gu completely. The doppelganger's face was pale and he fell to the ground with a plop, his breath weak. Zhuan immediately took out the heavenly starry sky essence and poured it into the doppelganger's mouth. After drinking several bottles of heavenly starry sky essence, the doppelganger barely regained some strength, but it would still take a long time for him to fully recover. The effect of the heavenly starry sky essence is really not as good as before. Zhuowen's eyes were complicated. Since his original body had advanced to the enlightenment realm, and his doppelganger had reached the three extremes, the heavenly starry sky essence, a precious treasure liquid, had become dispensable to Zhuan. It should be known that a drop of heavenly starry sky essence could restore a cultivator to his peak state. Its effect was heaven-defying, but unfortunately, the effect of the heavenly starry sky essence was only applicable to cultivators below the void sky 9th step. Now that Zhuan was a cultivator who had reached the void sky 9th step, the effect of the heavenly starry sky essence on him was really minimal, especially for his doppelganger, which had almost no effect. The fiery red bead flew over and landed in front of the doppelganger. Then it kept circling around the doppelganger, looking extremely excited and affectionate. It seems that the Zhurong gu has absorbed the doppelganger's blood essence. It's actually so close to the doppelganger. Zhuowen's original body's eyes flickered. He nodded and immediately put away the everlasting ice lotus. The moment he completely refined the Zhurong gu, the boiling magma in the Earth's core completely calmed down. Then Zhuowen's original body found that the magma in the Earth's core, under the control of the Zhurong gu, surrounded the doppelganger. Although the temperature of the magma was terrifying, it could not cause any harm to the doppelganger. Moreover, Zhuan was pleasantly surprised to find that as the magma wrapped around the doppelganger, the flame energy in the magma was constantly absorbed by the Zhurong gu, and it actually helped the doppelganger recover its strength. Although the doppelganger's physical body was strong and had the bloodline of the Devourer King, the blood fusion secret technique was too terrifying. Even the doppelganger was weak because of the excessive loss of blood essence. However, the Zhurong gu was not bad. While absorbing the flame energy in the magma, it also fed the doppelganger a pure energy, which reduced the doppelganger's weakness by a lot. Moreover, Yun did not know whether it was an illusion or not, but as the Zhurong gu transmitted this pure energy to the doppelganger seemed to have become weaker. Not only did Zhuowen feel that the weakness had disappeared, but the doppelganger's strength also seemed to have improved a little. Feeling the benefits, Zhuowen's eyes suddenly lit up. I didn't expect the Zhurong gu to have such benefits. I'll leave my doppelganger here to recuperate first. My original body will go to the boundless Taishu first. Zhuan took a deep look at the doppelganger and the Zhurong-gu, which were wrapped in magma, and decided to leave the doppelganger and the Zhurong-gu here. Chapter 2553. Black Market. Although the Zhurong-gu was only a goo worm, it was not an ordinary goo worm. It was a goo worm from the ancestral sorcerer's body. Zhuan naturally would not provoke the main body of the Zhurong-gu worm if it was not necessary. Especially after inheriting the memories of Miao Bang, he knew very well that each of the 12 ancestral sorcerers was an extremely terrifying existence. Furthermore, he had only obtained a small part of the Zhurong-gu worm. Just this small part of the Zhurong-gu worm already had such great power. There was no doubt that the main body of the Zhurong-gu worm was even more terrifying. Zhuan did not dare to let his guard down. In addition, Zhuan's main purpose this time was to find the Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng, Great Simplicity Double Dragon Ganoderma, and 8 trigrams Divination Yang Water. If he provoked the Zhurong-gu worm, Zhuan would not be able to find these 3 level 9 divine herbs with peace of mind. When Zhuan left the barren planet and entered the periphery of Wuji Taishu, he immediately felt a solemn and desolate atmosphere. Wuji Taishu was a star domain that looked like a ruin and occupied an extremely vast area. Zhuan could see the occasional glimmer of starlight in the huge Wuji Taishu from afar. Of course, these starlights only occupied a very small portion of the boundless Taishu. Most of the boundless Taishu was pitch black, so one would have to get closer to see the pitch black parts of the boundless Taishu clearly. The periphery of Wuji Taishu was shrouded in a misty fog, which made Wuji Taishu appear even more mysterious. At this moment, the periphery of Wuji Taishu was extremely lively. Many cultivators were bustling around the periphery. At the same time, Zhuan also saw many buildings and cave abodes in the periphery, which were obviously built by these cultivators temporarily. Furthermore, Zhuan discovered that most of these cultivators were moving around the periphery. No one dared to enter Wuji Taishu. "Senior, you look very unfamiliar. You must have just arrived at Wuji Taishu, right?" Suddenly, a slightly shaky voice was heard and attracted Zhuan's attention. Zhuan turned his head and looked at the honest young man in front of him. He nodded and said, "Yes." This honest-looking young man's cultivation level was not very high. He was only True God 3 disasters and had not even reached the Void Sky realm. Zhuan could see the reverence in his eyes. Clearly, this simple and honest youth should have noticed that Zhuan was a Void Sky cultivator. Although Zhuan had concealed most of his aura, ordinary people would not be able to see through his cultivation. Although this simple and honest young man's cultivation was not high, his eyesight was not bad. He could tell that Zhuan was not ordinary, so naturally, he was very respectful to Zhuan. "Senior must have come to the boundless Taishu to search for treasures, right? However, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed, Senior. The boundless Taishu has been sealed off by the 100 halls of the Taiching immortal realm. Ordinary people can't enter without a strong background." The honest-looking young man looked disappointed when he said that. He was an itinerant cultivator and was not strong enough, so he could only wander around the periphery of Wuji Taishu. Zhuan nodded. He had already inquired about this from Qi Qi and Lan Ji. "However, if Senior wants to enter the boundless Taishu, I have a way to let you in," the honest-looking young man suddenly said. Zhuan exclaimed softly and looked deeply at the honest-looking young man until the latter's scalp turned numb. Zhuan then said leisurely, "If you know the way to enter the boundless Taishu, why don't you go in and tell me instead?" The honest-looking young man did not dare hide anything and smiled bitterly. "Senior, I'm only at the True God realm. Even if I enter the boundless Taishu, I'll be courting death. You might not know this, but there are quotas to enter the boundless Taishu, and I happen to know the black market for quotas. Although I know the channels, I'm embarrassed. The quotas are easily worth millions of divine stones. I don't have that many divine stones to squander." Zhuan's eyes flickered. He took another look at the honest-looking young man and nodded. "If there really is a quota to enter the boundless Taishu, I won't treat you badly if you take me there." As he spoke, Zhuowen casually tossed a divine stone to the honest-looking young man. When the honest-looking young man saw that it was actually a high-grade divine stone, his eyes instantly revealed an expression of wild joy. He hurriedly nodded and bowed. The periphery of Wuji Taishu was extremely lively and prosperous. There were more cultivators here than in ordinary galaxies, and all of them were powerhouses. One could easily encounter a void sky powerhouse. Compared to the Long River Galaxy, this place was simply a paradise for powerhouses. The honest-looking young man quickly led Zhuowen into a huge meteorite continent. As soon as Zhuowen entered the meteorite continent, he discovered that there was a level 9 array formation among the countless restrictions on the meteorite continent. Moreover, this level 9 array formation was similar to an array formation that gathered starry sky energy. The starry sky energy on the meteorite continent was extremely rich. Compared to other places, this meteorite continent was like a paradise. The honest-looking young man quietly led Zhuowen into a dark alley. It was a dead end. The honest-looking young man came to the dead end and gently knocked on the wall in front of the alley a few times. Then, a huge opening appeared on the wall, just big enough for one person to enter. "Huang Qi, we have another guest." On the other side of the alley, a black-clothed man appeared and glanced at Zhuowen behind the honest-looking young man. The honest-looking young man scratched his head and hurriedly nodded. "Yes, this senior is also here for a quota." The black-clothed man nodded. After sending the honest-looking young man away, he looked at Zhuowen and said indifferently, "Let's go." Zhuowen didn't mind and followed the black-clothed man inside. The moment he entered, the alley behind him turned into a dead end again. What appeared in front of Zhuowen was a deep corridor. On both sides of the corridor were fences made of purple sandalwood. It looked very antique. Along the corridor, Zhuowen followed the black-clothed man. During this time, the two of them didn't say a word. At the end of the corridor, a door appeared in front of Zhuowen. The black-clothed man pointed at the door and said, "Inside is the black market. If you want a quota, you can naturally get it by paying a sufficient price." Speaking up to here, the black-clothed man spread out his hands and said to Zhuowen, "The entrance fee of the black market is 1,000 high-grade divine stones." Zhuowen frowned slightly. Although he felt that the entrance fee of the black market was a bit of a scam, Zhuowen still paid the 1,000 high-grade divine stones to the black-clothed man. After the black-clothed man put away the 1,000 high-grade divine stones, he nodded and took out a mask. After letting Zhuowen put it on, he opened the door. The moment Zhuowen entered the door, he felt a powerful divine sense land on his body. It seemed that after discovering that Zhuowen wasn't special, these divine senses all withdrew. Chapter 2554. An old friend. The divine consciousness lingered on Zhuowen for a quarter of an hour before slowly withdrawing. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes as he felt that the divine consciousness was somewhat familiar. Although he felt that the divine consciousness was very familiar, he could not recall who it was at the moment. Furthermore, the black market was filled with all sorts of people, so it was really impossible to find the owner of the divine consciousness. The space inside the black market was not big, only about the size of 10 ordinary rooms. There were dozens of people inside, and most of them were wearing masks. The masks were rather strange as they could block divine consciousness, so others could not use their divine consciousness to see their true appearance and aura. Therefore, although Zhuowen wanted to find the owner of the familiar divine consciousness, he knew that it would be very difficult for him to find the owner of the divine consciousness unless the owner told him. This space was extremely hidden. When Zhuowen tried to scan it with his divine consciousness, he discovered that there was a divine restriction array at the edge of the space. With Zhuowen's current powerful divine consciousness, the divine restriction array did not have much effect on Zhuowen. If Zhuowen wanted to, he could forcibly break the divine restriction array. Of course, Zhuowen naturally would not do that. If he did, he would probably be immediately chased out of the black market by the owner. There were many seats in the black market space. These seats were centered around a circular platform in the center and spread out in all directions like a flower. The circular platform was the stamen, and the surrounding seats were the petals. The number of seats here was much more than the number of cultivators. Zhuan casually found a remote corner and sat down. The moment he sat down, a figure came to Zhuowen's side and sat down next to him. "Brother Zhua, I didn't expect you to come to Boundless Taishu as well." A familiar divine consciousness entered Zhuowen's mind. Zhuan was slightly surprised and immediately sized up the figure in front of him seriously. Although the figure was also wearing a mask, his clothes were rather shabby and did not look like the clothes of an expert. At that moment, the person was openly looking at Zhuan. "Brother Ziwei?" Zhuan asked uncertainly. The person nodded slightly and said, "That's me. I guessed it was you because I sensed the aura of extreme energy from you." Zhuan nodded. "So that's how it is." His clone wasn't by his side, so he wasn't sensitive to extreme energy. Of course, although Zhuowen's true body was not at the Three Extremities realm, his doppelganger had been with his true body for a long time, so it was inevitable that there would be some aura of extreme energy on his body. However, the extreme energy on Zhuowen's body was very thin. He was only slightly weaker than Tai Ching. His name is well known. Crepe Myrtle Star King's eyes became mysterious as he said, "The Mountain River ancestor once told me that if I could find what he wanted in the Boundless Taishu, he would share the cultivation methods after the Three Extremities realm with me." Tai Ching's strength was unfathomable. The Mountain River ancestor was only slightly weaker than Tai Ching. Zhuan estimated that the Mountain River ancestor's strength should be on par with the middle stage of the Two Extremities realm of life and death, which was on the same level as Palace Master Wujue of the Six Desires heavenly domain. Although Crepe Myrtle Star King was also in the Three Extremities realm, he had only been in the Three Extremities realm for a few decades. Decades ago, Crepe Myrtle Star King had just survived the 20th storm and could barely fight with Great Brahma. However, after decades of consolidation, Crepe Myrtle Star King's strength was comparable to the peak of the Death Realm. There was still a gap between him and the Two Extremities realm of life and death. Although Crepe Myrtle Star King had witnessed Zhuowen defeating Great Brahma with one move, his decades of improvement made him realize that the gap between him and Zhuowen wasn't that big. He estimated that although his strength wasn't as strong as Zhuowen's, it shouldn't be too far off. Since the Mountain River ancestor was a veteran extreme grade expert, Crepe Myrtle Star King's reverence for him was obviously much stronger than Zhuowen's. Zhuowen also saw the look in Crepe Myrtle Star Monarch's eyes. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile, but he did not care too much about this. Instead, he asked, "What is the thing that the Mountain River ancestor wants?" After the price reached 10 million, there was basically no other voice. The only bidders were Zhuan and the petite masked woman in front of him. Zhuan did not care about the gaze that the lady shot over. He shook his head and no longer spoke. He had only come here for the quota. With his current price, he was already ranked second. Naturally, he would not bid against this woman in a fit of pique. As for the Purple Star Monarch, he had already shouted once before. His bid was ranked fourth, so he could also get a spot. When the petite woman saw that Zhuan did not say anything, the smile in her eyes became even wider. Then, she turned her head and simply ignored Zhuan. After the old man called out 3 times, the 5 spots were all finalized. The old man also sent someone to give a black jade token to Zhuowen and the other 4. This jade token was clearly the symbol of a spot. Zhuowen and the Crepe Myrtle Star Monarch each received a spot. As for the other 3 spots, besides the petite masked woman, the other spot was a woman with a tranquil temperament who sat beside the petite woman. The last spot fell into the hands of a black-clothed man. After the black-clothed man obtained the spot, he hurriedly left the black market. Moreover, Zhuan found with his divine sense that after the black-clothed man left, several people in the black market followed him. Obviously, they were up to no good. It's common for people to eat each other in the black market. "Brother Long, let's go." The Purple Star Monarch also noticed the situation after the black-clothed man left and said indifferently. Zhuan did not move. His gaze fell on the petite woman and the other 2 women who were about to get up and leave. He revealed a thoughtful look. The Purple Star Monarch noticed Zhuowen's gaze and said with a smile, "Brother Long, could it be that you have your eyes on those 2 women?" Jun shook his head and said indifferently, "No, these two women give me a very familiar feeling. They are a bit like my acquaintances. Let's go and take a look." The Purple Star Monarch shrugged and did not say anything. He slowly followed Zhuowen and left the black market. However, the moment Zhuowen and the Purple Star Monarch left the black market, they also noticed that several people were quietly following behind them. When Zhuowen and the Purple Star Monarch completely left the black market and entered an extremely remote alley in the outside world, several people behind them immediately rushed out and blocked their way. There were a total of 4 people in front of them. The leader was a bearded man with a vast aura. He was actually an expert of the Void Sky 8 steps. The other 3 were all at the Void Sky 7 steps. After the 4 people left the black market, they took off the masks on their faces and looked at Zhuowen and the Purple Star Monarch mockingly. "Leave the jade tokens you obtained and get out of here," the bearded man said with extreme disdain. Zhuowen had concealed most of his aura. Thus, he did not appear like an expert. As for Star Monarch Crepe Myrtle, he cultivated an extreme power. If he were not fighting, he would appear no different from an ordinary cultivator. "Get out. If you dare to say another word, even if you kneel down and beg for mercy, you will still die." Zhuowen's eyes were cold. A mere cultivator of the Void Sky 8 steps actually dared to rob him. He was really tired of living. The bearded man and the other 3 had gloomy looks in their eyes. The bearded man sneered and said, "Arrogant guy, I only planned to cripple you and not kill you. Now, I think you should pay the price for your arrogance." With that, the bearded man suddenly stepped out and threw a punch. The fist energy was condensed to the extreme and set off gusts of wind. It was like an angry dragon coming out of the sea and blasted toward Jun. The other 3 did not make a move. Instead, they watched the show with mocking eyes. The bearded man was very powerful. The 3 of them had seen it with their own eyes. In their opinion, the white-clothed young man in front of them was undoubtedly going to die. Unfortunately, the moment the bearded man's fist landed on Zhuowen's left cheek, he immediately felt an unprecedented sense of danger. Then, his right hand suddenly lost all feeling and pain filled his entire body. The other black-clothed man standing behind Lan Ji cupped his fists and said in a more courteous manner than Lan Ji, "This humble one is an elder of the North Dock Hall, Chen Yu. Under the orders of the Hall Master, I would like to meet Miss Lian Meng." "Miss Lian Meng, the Hall Master of Yinqin Hall invites you in." The other man with a gloomy expression said coldly. Lian Meng looked at the 3 people and her beautiful eyes couldn't help but change. She didn't expect that the 3 halls would know about her coming out. Her whereabouts were clearly very secretive. Apart from senior sister Jing Hai, no one else knew about it. Another group of people flew over from the distance and intercepted Lian Meng and Lan Ji. "The Hall Master of Purple Cloud Hall invites you in." A purple-clothed woman cupped her fists and said to Lian Meng, "The Hall Master of Boulder Hall invites you in. The Hall Master of Desolation Hall invites you in." Voices rang out one after another, causing Lian Meng's face to turn paler and paler. There were a total of 27 people intercepting her. Each group represented a palace in the Grand Clarity Immortal Realm, and they were all here for Lian Meng. "Aren't you afraid that my master will blame you for offending your superiors?" Lian Meng said with a gloomy expression. Lan Ji grinned and said, "Lady Lian Meng, if you say this to others, they might believe you, but if you say it to us, I'm afraid it won't be very convincing." Hundreds of years ago, Honorable Tai Ching, Honorable Shangqing, and Honorable Yuqing all went into seclusion at the same time. After that, there was no more news. 30 years ago, the origin of the heavenly domain, Purple Qi from the east, dissipated and disappeared. Honorable 3 purities never came out. The other palace masters all guessed that something had happened to them. Lian Meng took off her mask and narrowed her beautiful eyes. "Lan Ji, you better shut your crow's beak. Nothing will happen to my master. When he comes out, you and all of you will die without a doubt." The purple-clothed woman sneered and said, "Lady Lian Meng, if it weren't for your innate immortal body, we wouldn't be so polite. Otherwise, you wouldn't even have the chance to speak. I think it would be best for Lady Lian Meng to follow me to meet Palace Master Zixia. When the purple-clothed woman said this, the others subconsciously frowned. However, Palace Master Zixia's strength couldn't be underestimated. Most of them didn't say anything. Lan Ji, on the other hand, sneered, "Lan Ranhal's hall master has invited you. Your purple cloud hall had better retract your order." The purple-clothed woman's beautiful eyes turned cold, but she didn't refute. Although her cultivation wasn't afraid of Lan Ji, the Palace Master Zixia had behind him was stronger than Palace Master Zixia. However, even if Palace Master Zixia was stronger than Palace Master Zixia, there was a limit to it. The purple-clothed woman wasn't worried. If Lan Ji tried to snatch her away, she wouldn't mind fighting back. "Junior sister Lian Meng, my martial brothers from Palace Master Zixia have also come. After all, you are Honorable Taiching's disciple. Although Honorable Taiching is in seclusion and doesn't know what's going on, these people won't dare to force you. As long as you say that you want to meet Palace Master Zixia, these people won't force you. Moreover, our martial brothers from Palace Master Zixia will protect us." Jing Hai walked behind Lian Meng and whispered to her. Lian Meng's delicate body trembled. She thought of something and looked at Jing Hai in disbelief. "Senior sister Jing Hai, it's you?" Seeing Lian Meng's expression, Jing Hai knew that the latter had guessed it. She sighed and said, "Junior sister Lian Meng, I was forced to do this. Palace Master Zixia asked me to do this. You can't blame me." Lian Meng looked at Jing Hai in front of her and suddenly felt that the latter had become extremely unfamiliar. It was as if she didn't know her at all. She knew that Jing Hai must be the reason why her whereabouts were exposed. "Junior sister Lian Meng, you'd better make a decision quickly. The other palaces are all tigers and wolves. They will likely not show mercy to you. However, Nine Firmaments Palace is different. I can plead for mercy on your behalf. All you need to do is choose to meet the Palace Master of Nine Firmaments Palace." Jing Hai hastily sent Chen Feng a secret vocal transmission. Lian Meng sneered again and again. However, she distanced herself from Jing Hai and said, "Jing Hai, I have truly misjudged you. Originally, I had always regarded you as my best sister. However, you betrayed me. I have helped you so much in vain." Jing Hai's pretty face turned gloomy. She didn't expect Lian Meng to directly shed all pretense of cordiality with her. Lian Meng's character was originally rather weak. She didn't expect her to become so unyielding at this time. "Hee, your Palace Master Zixia is probably looking for me because of my innate immortal body. Before Master went into seclusion, no one dared to have any ideas about me. However, Master has been in seclusion for a long time and the heavenly domain's source energy has also dissipated. You think that there's a problem with Master Zixia's cultivation, so you dare to have ideas about me?" Chapter 2557. Boundless Heaven and Earth Talisman. As soon as Lian Meng finished speaking, she waved her jade-like hand and blasted Jing Hai behind her. The powerful energy of Void Sky 8 steps poured down mercilessly on Jing Hai. Jing Hai was already prepared and retreated in advance. At the same time, she took out an aqua-blue divine sword from her spirit ring and blasted it out. Rumble! The aqua-blue divine sword and Lian Meng's attack collided, causing an ear-piercing explosion. Jing Hai groaned and blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. She was immediately sent flying. On the other hand, Lian Meng remained where she was, as steady as a rock. Although Jing Hai and Lian Meng were both at the intermediate stage of Void Sky 8 steps, Jing Hai was just an ordinary cultivator while Lian Meng had an innate immortal body. Even those at the peak of Void Sky 8 steps might not necessarily be a match for her. "Miss Lian Meng, you are too presumptuous. Our Nine Firmaments Palace has never mistreated you. Junior sister Jing Hai is as close as a sister to you. Now, you actually injured Jing Hai. Are you looking down on our Nine Firmaments Palace?" A furious roar sounded from the surrounding crowd. Soon after, a black-clothed man led several cultivators and rushed towards Lian Meng. "Everyone, this is a private matter of our Nine Firmaments Palace. Junior sister Lian Meng attacked me for no reason. Our 9 Firmaments Palace will repay this debt. If anyone dares to help Miss Lian Meng at this juncture, our 9 Firmaments Palace will not rest until one of us is dead. After Jing Hai was blasted back, she stabilized herself and immediately sent a voice transmission to the surrounding crowd. All of this happened too suddenly. Before the surrounding crowd could even react, the experts of 9 Firmaments Palace had already rushed out and pounced towards Lian Meng. By the time they reacted, Jing Hai had already taken the initiative and explained the grudge clearly. If anyone interfered, they would be interfering with the private matter of 9 Firmaments Palace. They would not rest until one of them was dead. For a moment, many of the forces from the other palaces were in a state of panic and did not dare to move forward. Of course, these indecisive forces were not as powerful as 9 Firmaments Palace. They did not dare to offend 9 Firmaments Palace too ruthlessly. Not rest until one of us is dead? Today, I will represent Purple Cloud Palace to experience 9 Firmaments Palace's relentlessness. Today, I'll snatch it. The purple-clothed woman from the Purple Cloud Hall sneered and flew out with the experts from the Purple Cloud Hall. Lan Ji sneered, not bothering to speak any nonsense. Together with the purple-clothed woman, all the masters of Eisenhall also moved out. Aside from these 3 palaces, the other palaces did not dare to make a move. Instead, they just watched from the sidelines. 9 Firmaments Palace, Lan Ran Palace, and Purple Cloud Palace were among the top 10 palaces in the Grand Clarity Immortal Realm. Moreover, these 3 great palaces had all sent experts at the half-step Void Sky 9th step. Each of their lineups was terrifyingly powerful and couldn't be underestimated. As for the experts sent by the other palaces, they were barely satisfactory. Although the people sent by the other palaces had the intention to fight for the treasures, after seeing the lineup of the 3 great palaces, they all stood in the distance and watched, not easily making a move. Lian Meng's beautiful eyes were filled with shock and anger. Lan Ran Hall, Purple Cloud Hall, and 9 Firmaments Hall had all sent half-step Virtual Sky 9th step experts. Coupled with the other dozen or so experts from these 3 halls, even Lian Meng couldn't bear it. Although Lian Meng had an innate immortal physique, terrifying talent, and powerful strength, her cultivation was only at the intermediate Void Heaven 8th step. Facing a half-step Void Sky 9th stage expert was already difficult, not to mention 3 half-step Void Sky 9th stage experts and a dozen or so experts at the 8th stage of Void Sky 8th stage. Lian Meng bit her lower lip with her pearly white teeth. With a flick of her jade-like hand, she took out a palm-sized 8 trigrams plate from her spirit ring. Once the 8 trigrams plate appeared, Lian Meng began to form hand seals with both hands and began to activate the 8 trigrams plate. Rumble! The 8 trigrams plate started to spin rapidly. Soon after, a blazing black and white light erupted from it, revolving around Lian Meng's body and forming a black and white defensive array. If one looked carefully, they would see black and white light appearing around the defensive formation. The light gathered below Lian Meng's feet, faintly forming the image of a huge 8 trigrams formation. Bang bang bang! The instant Lian Meng took out her 8 trigrams disc, the 3 half-step Virtual Sky 9th step experts from the 3 great palaces had already arrived. Soon after, 3 terrifying attacks continuously bombarded the 8 trigrams disc's defense. The 8 trigrams disc shook violently, as if it would shatter at any moment. Lian Meng's complexion turned slightly pale. The instant the 8 trigrams disc shattered, Lian Meng spat out a mouthful of blood. She took out a talisman and turned into a wisp of green smoke before disappearing. Boundless Heaven and Earth Talisman? The instant Lian Meng disappeared, the 3 half-step Virtual Sky 9th stage experts stared blankly at the disappearing Lian Meng. One of them exclaimed in surprise. Junior sister Jing Hai, do you have any way to find Lian Meng? Among the 3 half-step Virtual Sky 9th stage experts, a middle-aged man with a gloomy gaze turned to look at Jing Hai. As for the other 2 half-step Virtual Sky 9th stage experts, one of them was the purple-clothed woman from the Purple Cloud Palace, and the other was the white-haired old man. Lan Ji followed closely behind the white-haired old man with an extremely respectful expression. The purple-clothed woman and the white-haired old man also looked at Jing Hai. They knew that Jing Hai was Lian Meng's best sister and understood Lian Meng's background the best. She definitely had some methods. I left an imprint on Junior's sister Lian Meng's body. Senior brother, just follow this imprint. Jing Hai calmly took out a wisp of white light. The instant the white light appeared, it shot into the starry sky ahead as if chasing after something. Let's go! The moment Jing Hai released the white light, the middle-aged man immediately took out his flying divine tool. Soon after, he brought Jing Hai and the rest of the people from the Nine-Cloud Palace and chased after the white light. The moment the middle-aged man shot out, the purple-clothed woman and the white-haired old man also followed closely behind, unwilling to be outdone. As for the people from the other palaces who were originally spectating, they also followed like a swarm of bees. Although the people sent by the Blue Cloud Palace, the Purple Cloud Palace, and the Nine Cloud Palace were much stronger than them, each of them still harbored a fluke mentality. Perhaps they would have a chance to capture Lian Meng. Moreover, they had more people on their side compared to the three palaces. If they joined forces, they might not be the opponents of the three palaces. In a desolate starry sky, on a desolate planet, Lian Meng stopped. At this moment, Lian Meng's face was completely pale. The talisman she was holding in her hand had completely turned into ashes and dissipated. The Heaven and Earth Infinite Talisman was left to her by her master, the Grand Pure One. It could instantly teleport her hundreds of millions of kilometers away, ignoring all obstructions and formations. It was used in a critical moment to escape. Lian Meng looked around and discovered that she was still in the periphery of the boundless Taishu. She knew that she had not gone too far. However, thinking that she had already shaken off the pursuit of the other palaces, Lian Meng felt a lot more at ease. Why do the other palaces of the Grand Pure One Immortal Realm want to capture you? I remember that you are the disciple of the Grand Pure One. Someone actually dares to touch the disciple of the Sky Domain Master? Suddenly, a hoarse voice came from behind Lian Meng. Frightened, Lian Meng immediately unleashed an attack behind her. Chapter 2558. Mass Anger, It's You? A masked man appeared in front of Lian Meng. This man had a well-proportioned body and his white clothes made him look extremely slender. Lian Meng was not unfamiliar with this masked man. He was the person who had bid against her in the black market. Moreover, for some reason, when she saw this masked man, Lian Meng felt a strange sense of familiarity. Are you also here to capture me? Lian Meng did not answer the man's question. Instead, she took a few steps back and asked cautiously. The masked man shook his head and said, Why would I want to capture you? What I want to ask is, why would those people want to capture you? Someone actually dares to offend the disciple of the master of the heaven region. Could it be that they are tired of living? You don't know? Lian Meng frowned and said. The masked man spread his hands and said, I'm not a cultivator of the Hua Xia heaven region. I came from another heaven region. I really don't know much about the matters of the Hua Xia heaven region. When the masked man said that he was not a cultivator of the Hua Xia heaven region, Lian Meng relaxed a lot. She looked at the masked man and sighed, Since you're not a cultivator of the Hua Xia heaven region, it's useless for you to know about this. It's better if you don't know. The masked man went silent and said, Do you know that someone has placed a tracking imprint on your body? Lian Meng was startled. She sneered and said, How is that possible? If someone placed a tracking imprint on my body, I would be able to sense it. Because my body is completely different from ordinary cultivators. The masked man shook his head and said, I'm not talking about your body specifically. I'm talking about something in your spirit ring that has been imprinted by someone. If you believe me, you can check all the items in your spirit ring. Lian Meng's expression changed slightly. She seemed to have thought of something and quickly took out a jade hairpin from her spirit ring. This jade hairpin had an elegant design. It was sparkling and translucent. It was extremely beautiful. Lian Meng checked the jade hairpin a few times with her spirit sense. Her face turned pale and she immediately destroyed the hairpin. Senior Sister Jing Hai. Lian Meng's beautiful eyes were filled with sadness and loss. She did not expect Jing Hai, who she had always treated as her best sister, to be so ambitious. She had placed a tracking imprint on her body long ago. I have to leave this place. Lian Meng glanced at the masked man, then took a step forward, intending to leave this desolate planet. It's too late. They've already surrounded this planet, the masked man said unhurriedly. However, Lian Meng did not believe it. She sent out her spiritual sense, but did not discover anyone. Although she could feel that this masked man's strength was not ordinary, she naturally did not believe that this masked man's divine sense was much stronger than hers. Since she did not discover it, this masked man must be deceiving her. However, the instant Lian Meng flew out of the planet, her face turned extremely pale. That was because many figures were rushing towards her from within the range of her divine sense. Leading the group were the 3 half-step Void Sky 9th step experts from Azuran Hall, Purple Cloud Hall, and 9 Firmaments Hall. The rest were cultivators from these 3 halls and experts sent by other halls. Moreover, Lian Meng discovered that the killing intent of the 3 half-step Virtual Sky 9th stage experts was firmly locked onto her. She knew that she could not escape now. Once she was locked on by the killing intent, it would be difficult for her to escape even if she tried to escape. Moreover, these 3 half-step Void Sky 9th stage powerhouses were extremely fast. They arrived here in just a few breaths of time. Even if Lian Meng tried to escape now, it would be no different from not escaping at all. At the same time, Lian Meng recalled the warning of the masked man. From this, it could be seen that this masked man's divine sense was much stronger than hers. He actually knew that these people were approaching in advance. Thinking of this, Lian Meng returned to the planet. Soon after, she looked at the masked man and said, "The people chasing me will be here soon. They are all people you can't afford to offend. You should take this opportunity to leave. Their target is me, so they won't stop you." The masked man looked deeply at Lian Meng and said with a smile, "Miss, you're too naive. Since I appeared in the same place as you, it's natural for people to think that I'm traveling with you. Not everyone is as kind as you. Miss Lian Meng, you should surrender." A loud shout came from outside the planet. So. The sound of something breaking through the air rang out. Soon after, the middle-aged man from 9 Firmaments Hall, the white-haired old man from Azuran Hall, and the purple-clothed woman from Purple Cloud Hall arrived above the planet and looked down at Lian Meng. As for the masked man standing not far from Lian Meng, the 3 of them basically ignored him. After the 3 of them arrived on the planet, the sound of something breaking through the air rang out behind them. Soon after, the rest of the people from the 3 halls arrived as well, followed by the cultivators sent by the other halls. In an instant, the planet was basically surrounded by the experts from the 3 halls. So, it seems that I won't be able to escape today. I can only fight to the death. Lian Meng sighed. With a wave of her jade-like hand, she took out a purple brocade with flowing light. Like a purple snake, it coiled around her body. "Miss Lian Meng, you're simply a mantis trying to stop a chariot. You're a smart person. You should give up on resisting and follow my 9 Firmaments Hall. My 9 Firmaments Hall will definitely ensure your safety," said the middle-aged man from 9 Firmaments Hall. "Miss Lian Meng, Purple Cloud Hall promises not to harm you as long as you follow my Purple Cloud Hall," said the purple-clothed woman with cupped fists. "Eisen Hall will treat Miss Lian Meng with respect. I hope that Miss Lian Meng can seriously consider it," said the white-haired old man indifferently. Lian Meng sneered, "I've seen many of your tricks. Not to mention that I don't believe you. Even if I believe that you won't harm me, I still won't leave with you. I came here this time to enter Boundless Taishu. Don't tell me that you plan to forcibly take me back? If Miss Lian Meng doesn't give us face, then we can only use such extreme means," sneered the middle-aged man from 9 Firmaments Hall. The faces of the white-haired old man and the purple-clothed woman were also covered with frost and coldness. They no longer had the enthusiasm from before. Just as the 2 sides were about to draw their swords, a figure passed by Lian Meng and stood between them. Lian Meng was stunned and immediately said, "What are you doing? This has nothing to do with you. Leave quickly." The person who suddenly stood between them was none other than the masked man. At this moment, the masked man turned his head and gave Lian Meng a reassuring look. Then, he looked at the many experts who had surrounded the entire planet and said indifferently, "I'll give you all a chance to live. Leave immediately before I count to 3. Otherwise, all of you will stay here forever." The masked man's words immediately caused an uproar. Everyone looked at the masked man as if they were looking at an idiot. "Who do you think you are? You're actually giving us a chance to live? Do you believe that I can kill you with a single slap? How dare you speak such arrogant words? You're simply courting death. This kind of trash can only show off with his mouth. When it comes to fighting, he's just an egg." In just an instant, terrifying killing intent gathered on the masked man. Chapter 25:59. All stay, reckless fool. You actually dare to speak such arrogant words. Do you think you're in existence like Honorable Tai Ching? The middle-aged man from 9 Firmaments Hall said disdainfully. The purple-clothed woman sneered, her smile filled with disdain. Clearly, she believed that this masked man was just pretending to be a fatty. She knew that once they attacked, this person would die without a doubt. The white-haired old man was disdainful, not even bothering to say a word. The masked man ignored the sneers and disdain of the surrounding experts. Instead, he began counting to himself, as if he was really going to attack when he counted to 3. Others might not know, but the masked man was very clear. He had the confidence and strength to do so. I said, "Are you crazy? Hurry up and leave this place." Lian Meng grabbed the masked man, wanting to forcefully pull him away. However, she soon discovered that the masked man was like a boulder, unable to be pulled away. Although Lian Meng knew that the masked man's strength was not bad, they were not facing one person. Instead, they were facing close to 100 experts. Among them, the weakest was at Void Sky Stage 7, and there were 3 half-step Void Sky Stage 9. Such a lineup was likely able to battle with Life Comprehension Realm powerhouses. Although Lian Meng knew that the masked man was stronger than her, it was impossible for him to have reached the Life Enlightening Realm. The 100 or so powerhouses surrounding the planet crossed their arms and sneered as they looked at the masked man who was seriously counting. They really wanted to see if the masked man would really dare to face them when he counted to 3. 1, 2, 3. After the masked man counted to 3, he was not surprised by the nearly 100 experts who did not move. He said, "Since you're not leaving, then stay." As he spoke, the masked man suddenly pulled out a long sword. The surface of the long sword was surrounded by a gray energy, filled with a strange aura of death. You really don't know the meaning of death. If you really dare to attack, then don't blame me for being merciless. The middle-aged man from 9 Firmaments Hall sneered. He took a step forward and punched out, aiming for the masked man's heart. The experts from 9 Firmaments Palace who came with them sneered. They wanted to see how the masked man would be killed by their powerful elder. Elder Jiohai is one of the few half-step illusionary sky 9th step experts in our 9 Firmaments Palace. Even in the Grand Clarity Immortal Realm, he can be considered an expert. This person is clearly a loose cultivator. Yet he actually dared to say such bold words. He's simply courting death. Jing Hai crossed his arms and spoke with disdain. Rumble. Soon, the middle-aged man's fist arrived in front of the masked man. The masked man swung his sword, causing the middle-aged man's frightening fist to scatter with a loud bang. The sword aura was like a rainbow as it rushed out and directly smashed in front of the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man didn't expect the masked man's sword chi to be so terrifying. In a moment of carelessness, he was immediately cut in two by the sword chi and exploded into a bloody mist. The middle-aged man's soul and illusory heavenly bridge were completely annihilated by the sword chi. Hiss hiss hiss. The moment the middle-aged man was finished off with a single sword strike, the surroundings suddenly fell silent. Then there were sounds of people sucking in cold air. Numerous gazes of disbelief stared fixedly at this scene. Then, an uproar erupted one after another. What's going on? Elder Jiohai of 9 Firmaments Palace was killed just like that? Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Are my eyes playing tricks on me too? Elder Jiohai was indeed killed. Moreover, he was killed with a single sword strike. This person is terrifying. The purple-clothed woman from Purple Cloud Palace and the gray-haired elder from Azurian Palace both revealed looks of dread. They looked cautiously at the masked man with the gray sword in his hand. A bad feeling rose in their hearts. The experts from 9 Firmaments Palace were all grief-stricken. Jinghai's jaw was about to drop. He was so stunned that he couldn't speak. That's one already. There are still 90 or so left. The masked man's leisurely voice rang out. A pair of cold eyes fell on the purple-clothed woman and the gray-haired elder. The purple-clothed woman and the gray-haired elder's faces immediately turned ugly. The purple-clothed woman said in a deep voice, "Sir, your strength is not bad. However, if Elder Jiohai had been careless, you would not have been able to kill him so easily. Moreover, today's matter has nothing to do with you. Please leave quickly. We will not pursue this matter with you." Although the gray-haired elder did not say anything, he clearly agreed with what the purple-clothed woman said. "Are you deaf? I said just now that I'll give you 3 seconds to leave immediately. However, you did not leave. Then, according to what I said just now, all of you will stay here." The masked man's indifferent voice rang out. Then he stomped his right foot. The entire planet shook. Moreover, the shaking energy was like ripples in water. It spread out in all directions, completely affecting the surrounding starry sky. Then, the entire planet and the surrounding starry sky were enveloped in a huge shadow. It's a formation. What a powerful formation. It's a level 9 formation. This person is actually a level 9 Divine Array Master. When did he set up the formation? We didn't even notice it. It's over. It's a level 9 formation. We can't resist it at all. Many cultivators around the planet were in despair. They looked at the huge formation that appeared outside the planet in disbelief. While everyone was in shock, the masked man shot out like an arrow. His target was the purple-clothed woman from the Purple Cloud Hall. "How dare you!" The purple-clothed woman was shocked and furious. She formed a seal with her jade-like hand. Suddenly, purple energy poured out and turned into a huge purple whale that rushed toward the masked man. The masked man casually slashed with his sword. The purple whale was cut in half. A sword chi pierced through and blasted in front of the purple-clothed woman. The purple-clothed woman's eyes were filled with fear. She took out a purple disc. Suddenly, the terrifying purple energy turned into a huge purple defense. The sword chi blasted on the purple defense. After a moment of stalemate, the purple defense shattered. The purple-clothed woman looked on in disbelief as the sword chi slashed between her eyebrows. Seeing that the purple-clothed woman, who was prepared, was not a match for the masked man's sword, everyone was shocked. The white-haired old man was scared out of his wits. The purple-clothed woman's strength was on par with his. The purple-clothed woman tried her best to block the attack, but she was still killed by the masked man's sword. How terrifying was this masked man? This person must be an expert of the Void Sky 9 steps, the white-haired old man screamed. He did not have the courage to face the masked man. Instead, he immediately rushed out of the planet. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.